Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep. So before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? It was supposed to be a simple reunion. 6 friends, 1 forest, and no cell service, just the way Derek planned it. They hadn't all been together in years. After college, life had pried them apart. Jobs, families, burnout. But last month, Derek sent a group message with one sentence. What if we did one more trip before we forget how to be friends? No emojis, no follow-ups, just that. Surprisingly, everyone replied within a day. Yes, I'm in. Let's go. Now here they were, deep in the folds of silent pines, where the trees hung like judges and the air forgot to move. Their campfire crackled in the center of a small clearing, surrounded by tall trunks that looked like they'd grown just to block out the stars. A tent for each person, circled like wagons from an old western. In the firelight, the faces looked like masks, smiling but a little off. So, Rachel said, leaning back on her elbows, "Who's got the scariest campfire story?" "Not it," said Marcus, already a few sips deep into his second beer. "I'm too happy right now. I don't want to wreck that." Jen exhaled smoke from a cheap cigarette. "Coward. Derek." He looked up from his seat on the log. "I've got one." "Oh shit," Rachel laughed. "Derek's telling a story. This must be serious." Derek smiled faintly. He had that look again, too still. Like someone who'd seen something he wasn't ready to share, but would anyway. "This didn't happen to me," he said slowly. "But it happened. A friend of mine was a ranger here in Silent Pines." Marcus chuckled. "Dude, come on. You seriously picked a horror story about the exact place we're in?" "Yes." No one laughed after that. Derek leaned closer to the fire. Shadows wrapped around his face. This friend, his name was Kevin. He was one of those guys who didn't scare easily. You know the type. Grew up in the woods, hunted, camped, fixed his own damn roof. The kind of man who didn't flinch when a bear walked by. Just watched it and said, "Stay there." They nodded. Everyone had met someone like that. Well, a few years back, Kevin got stationed here. Silent Pines. He was covering the fire tower about 20 miles from where we are now. Rachel glanced over her shoulder, like she suddenly remembered they were surrounded by dark woods. One night, he's on shift. He's writing in the logbook when he sees movement down at the tree line. There's this field of moonlight right below the tower, clear space, and right at the edge, something steps out. "Deer?" Jen asked, eyes narrowing. "Nope," Derek said. "Too tall, 2 legs, human-shaped, but wrong." "How wrong?" "I'm getting to that." He let the silence stretch. Someone shifted on the log. The fire popped. Kevin gets out his binoculars. Tries to see better. The thing is standing perfectly still. Then it waves. Webs. Marcus frowned. "Like hello?" "Exactly. Just like that. A little wave, like you do when you're trying not to scare someone." Rachel rubbed her arms. Now Kevin, being a ranger, has protocols. He radios out. No response. He watches it for 5 more minutes. It doesn't move. Just stands there, staring. Derek's voice dropped a little. Then it does something weird. It copies him. He lifts the binoculars again. It lifts its arms like it's holding binoculars, too. He steps back. It leans back. Everyone was still, so he shines his spotlight down on it. "You know, those big mounted ones." They nodded. "It's gone." The second the light hits where it was, nothing. "Did it run?" Jen asked. "No. He would have seen that. Just gone." Derek picked up a stick and jabbed at the fire. So Kevin locks up the tower, radios again, keeps the shotgun close. He doesn't sleep. Next morning, when backup arrives, he tells them what happened. They brush it off. Probably a prank, maybe a trick of the light. "Let me guess," Marcus said. "He quits, right?" "Nope," Derek said. "He stays. One of those I need to know what it was guys." He paused. 3 days later, he doesn't check in. Helicopter goes out. They find the tower door wide open. Nothing inside but his radio and boots. His boots were standing upright, like he stepped out of them without bending his legs. No one said anything. Derek tossed the stick into the fire and leaned back. Rachel cleared her throat. Okay, creepy. But probably made up. Of course it is, Marcus said too quickly. Right? Jen looked like she wanted to ask something but changed her mind. Rachel shook her head. Whatever. I'm going to get more wood. I'll go with you, Jen said. I don't trust the local shadow monsters. They both got up, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped into the woods. Marcus sighed. I hate that kind of story. The ones that sound just plausible enough to bother you later. Derek didn't answer. Marcus turned to him. You okay? Derek looked at the fire like he was remembering something. I didn't say this part, he muttered. Kevin left a note. Just 2 words. Marcus frowned. What? Don't copy. Marcus stared. Then Derek looked him in the eye. When we were sitting around the fire just now, did you notice? Marcus shifted. Notice what? That thing behind Rachel. It stood when she stood. Marcus blinked. And before that, it waved at me. Marcus stood slowly, scanning the edge of the campfire light. The flames crackled behind him, casting long shadows into the trees, where Rachel and Jen had disappeared just minutes earlier. Derek, he said cautiously. You're messing with me, right? Derek didn't answer right away. He just stared across the clearing, toward the dark spot where the figure had stood, or was still standing. I saw it before we even got here, Derek said quietly. Something in the trees, watching. Marcus tried to swallow, but his mouth had gone dry. Look, if this is a prank. It isn't. Derek's voice was low, certain. I didn't tell you everything earlier. The guy, Kevin. He wasn't just some random ranger. He was my cousin. Marcus froze. You're serious? Derek nodded. My mom told me what they found at the tower. The boots standing up like that. The door unlocked. He was the one who first brought me camping when I was a kid. We used to come out here. But why now? Marcus asked. Why bring us out here? Derek didn't answer that either. A sharp crack echoed from the woods to their right. Both men turned. Marcus reached for the flashlight resting on the log beside him and clicked it on. The beam jittered as his hand trembled. The trees swayed gently, whispering secrets in a language neither of them understood. Rachel's voice came faintly through the darkness. Guys, it sounded strange. Not panicked, not scared, but something in the tone felt off, like it had been filtered through something else. Marcus called back, Rachel. You okay? No answer. Then Jen's voice came, louder but flat. Come help us. We found something. Derek stood up. Don't. Marcus blinked. What? Derek's eyes were wide now. Did you hear what they said? They need help. No, Derek whispered. They said the same thing Kevin said on the radio. Come help. We found something. The exact words. That's what he repeated over and over until his last transmission. Another snap in the woods. This one closer. Marcus turned toward the sound, shining the flashlight toward the source. Between 2 trees, something moved. At first, it looked like Rachel. The same jacket, same posture. But she wasn't blinking, and her arms hung at her sides in a way that didn't look human. Too stiff, like someone wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. Rachel. Marcus called again, more hesitantly this time. No reply. Then Jen stepped out from behind a tree beside her. Except, Marcus's gut clenched. The flashlight flickered briefly, catching their faces in broken pieces. Their eyes were too wide. Smiling, but not with their mouths. With something else. Don't move, Derek said, gripping Marcus's shoulder hard. I don't think that's them. The 2 figures just stood there, side by side, watching the campfire, unmoving. Their feet didn't rustle leaves. Their breathing, if there was any, made no sound. Then, they both raised their right hands in unison and waved. Marcus stepped back, nearly tripping on a root. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," Derek said, "but it copies." Another wave, slower this time, almost thoughtful. "Rachel," Marcus yelled. "Jen!" "If that's really you, say something." Silence. Then the figures stepped forward, one smooth stride, perfectly in sync. "Get in the tent," Derek hissed. No, they ran. Marcus's heart pounded as they dove into Derek's tent and zipped it shut. Inside, their breathing was loud and ragged. The thin nylon walls did nothing to stop the feeling of something watching them from outside. "I think we're being hunted," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. Derek pulled a flashlight from his bag, then a pocket knife. "We stay quiet. If it copies us, maybe it doesn't know how to act if we don't give it something to work with." Marcus blinked. That makes no sense. Neither does a copy of Rachel standing outside without moving for 5 minutes. Suddenly, they heard movement, slow footsteps circling the tent, crunching softly over pine needles. Then came the voice. Derek. It was Rachel's, except it wasn't quite right, too deliberate, like someone trying to remember how to use vocal cords. "Derek, we found something." The last word came out cracked and disjointed, like it had been stitched together from several different voices. Then came Jen's voice, just outside the tent flap. "You should see it. It's beautiful." Derek's hand clamped over Marcus's mouth before he could respond. His eyes said everything, "Don't answer." The voices continued, murmuring in tones just slightly wrong. Then silence. Long silence. Minutes passed. Then the crunch of footsteps, moving away. Marcus whispered, "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know," Derek said. "But I think they want us to follow. To leave the fire. The stories. They always start with someone seeing something, then chasing it. And if we stay, maybe they lose interest. Or maybe..." He trailed off. More footsteps. This time heavier. Faster. Suddenly, someone slammed into the side of the tent. The whole thing buckled inward. A shape leaned against the mesh, its face inches from the nylon. It looked like Rachel, but up close. It was all wrong. The eyes were glassy and too round. The mouth smiled too wide. The skin looked like it had been pressed over something else. It whispered, "Were you now?" Then it was gone, just like that. Derek and Marcus sat frozen, listening. The woods had gone dead silent. Not even wind. Then, faintly, a sound in the distance, a girl's scream. Real. Ragged. Marcus's eyes went wide. That was Rachel. They didn't sleep. Not that night. The next morning, they unzipped the tent slowly, the morning sun slanting through the trees. The fire had burned low, embers glowing weakly. There was no sign of Rachel or Jen, just their tents, zipped closed. Derek moved to Rachel's first. "Wet," Marcus whispered. "What if it's them? Still pretending?" Derek gave him a look. "We can't leave them." He opened Rachel's tent. Empty. No gear, no pack, no sleeping bag, just a folded note sitting in the center. He picked it up with trembling fingers. The note said, "Don't copy. Don't respond. It hears you." Marcus turned to Jen's tent, unzipped it. Same thing. Empty. Identical note. They stood in the clearing, sick with confusion. "Maybe they ran," Marcus said. "They got scared, bolted into the woods, maybe trying to get help." Derek shook his head. Without their gear, without their boots. Marcus glanced down. 2 sets of boots were standing beside the tents. Upright. Empty. Exactly like Kevin's. They didn't wait around after that. They packed what they could, ditched the coolers and folding chairs, and started hiking down the trail. But even as they walked, Marcus kept hearing sounds behind them. Footsteps matching their pace. And once, just once, he glanced behind a tree and saw something watching. It looked like him. Same jacket, same backpack. But it didn't blink. It just smiled. They didn't talk much as they moved. The trail should have taken them back to the forest entrance by late morning. Derek had hiked this path countless times before. He knew its curves, dips, and turns. But after nearly 2 hours, something wasn't right. Marcus was the first to say it out loud. "We've passed this tree already." Derek stopped walking. He looked up at the tall pine Marcus pointed to. Its bark stripped on one side, revealing a pale wound in the trunk. "I marked this one last year," Derek muttered. "It was struck by lightning in July. We shouldn't be anywhere near it." Marcus turned slowly in a circle. The forest around them looked the same in every direction. Pine needles blanketed the floor, undisturbed. No prints, no broken branches. No sign they'd made any progress at all. "It's like we're going in circles," Marcus said, voice low. "But we haven't turned once." Derek pulled out his compass. It spun, not slowly, violently, like something underneath the plastic face was trying to escape. Marcus backed away. "Okay, that's not a malfunction. That's something else." The compass needle stopped abruptly, pointing due north. Derek stared at it. "That's not the direction we came from." "No," Marcus said, shaking his head. "We came from the west. I remember the sun. I swear to God, Derek, we're being led." They followed the compass anyway, because there was nothing else to follow. The deeper they went, the quieter the woods became. The air changed. Cooler. Still. Almost too still. And the trees. Marcus didn't notice at first, but after a while, he realized they were taller here. Older. Their trunks had knots that looked like eyes. One even looked like a face, pressed out from inside the bark, mouth open, as if screaming. Derek stopped again. "We're in the interior now." "The what?" "There's a central section of the forest, past the trails. Off the map. They say it was never charted because compasses don't work here. People get lost and don't come back." Marcus's stomach turned. "Why did we come here?" "We didn't. Something brought us." That's when they found the tower. It rose from the trees like a broken tooth, all rust and forgotten metal. An old ranger lookout, abandoned for decades. The ladder swayed slightly in the breeze. Derek stared up at it, eyes wide. "This is where Kevin disappeared." Marcus stepped back. "Nope, we're not doing this. That thing followed us here. It's using this place." "I need to see if there's a radio," Derek said. "Anything that can call for help." Before Marcus could argue, Derek grabbed the first rung and started climbing. Marcus stayed on the ground, nerves twitching. He scanned the woods. The sunlight was dimmer here, like the canopy had thickened, or the sky had clouded without warning. A whisper drifted from the trees behind him. "Marcus." He spun. Nothing, just trees. "Marcus." The voice came again. Closer this time. Familiar. It was Jen. He turned back toward the tower, opened his mouth to shout, but then stopped. There was someone else standing at the bottom of the ladder. Another Derek. Same shirt, same hair, same pack. But this Derek wasn't looking up. He was staring at Marcus, and smiling. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. What the hell? The Derek above him called down. "I think I found a..." "Wait, what's wrong?" Marcus didn't answer. He backed away slowly, eyes locked on the second Derek, who now tilted his head at an unnatural angle. "Marcus," it said. Not asked, said, like it had rehearsed the word. Marcus turned and ran. Back into the trees, heart thudding, lungs burning. Branches slapped his arms, but he didn't stop. Didn't look back. Until he tripped. He hit the ground hard, tumbling through underbrush, then landed at the edge of a dry creek bed. Silence. Then, a soft rustle. Someone was walking toward him. He pressed into the dirt, trying to vanish. Footsteps stopped just a few feet away. "Hey," came Derek's voice. "You all right?" Marcus didn't answer. How could he be sure? "Marcus, come on. It's me." He still didn't move. Then Derek crouched into view. Real Derek, sweat-soaked, wild-eyed. "It's me," he said again. I saw it too. It copied me. But I got down before it did anything. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Say something only you would know. Derek hesitated. You and Jen hooked up the summer before college and never told Rachel. Marcus blinked. Okay? That's real. They stood together now, trying to calm their breathing. That tower, Marcus whispered. We have to stay away from it. Yeah, I think it's a lure, Derek said. They want us to go there, just like Kevin. Just like Rachel and Jen. Something cracked behind them, then snapped. They turned just in time to see a third derrick collapse into itself. Bones crunching inward, skin tearing like paper. What was left behind wasn't flesh. It was hollow, like a costume made of wet bark and meat. It twitched, then went still. Run, Derek said. They did, again. The sun was gone now, but it wasn't night. Just dark. The trees grew denser. The ground felt wrong beneath their feet, too soft, like walking on organs. Every footfall squished. Then the fog came, thick, sudden, and with it voices, not calling, whispering, repeating phrases Marcus recognized, fragments of old conversations, jokes, arguments, childhood memories. They're using us against us, Derek said through clenched teeth. They're pulling pieces from our heads. Marcus fell to his knees. He could hear his father's voice, from years ago, telling him he'd never be enough, that he always ran when things got hard. Stop, he muttered. Then louder, Estup, the fog recoiled, just slightly, like it had been feeding and didn't like being noticed. They pressed forward blindly until the trees opened, and suddenly they were back. The camp, the fire pit, the tents, everything exactly as it had been before. Even the boots still stood beside the tents. Marcus turned slowly. We didn't move at all. Derek walked to the center of the clearing. Or maybe the forest moved around us. Then they heard footsteps, someone approaching. Rachel, but not the copy, the real one. Her face scratched, eyes red, jacket torn. She stumbled into the clearing, saw them, and burst into tears. Where's Jen? Marcus asked. Rachel just shook her head. They didn't sleep that night either. The three of them sat around the fire, backs together, watching the trees. Occasionally, something would move beyond the edge of the light. Sometimes it looked like Marcus, sometimes Jen. Once, it looked like all three of them, just standing, waiting. Rachel finally whispered what happened. We followed a light, she said. We thought it was another group. Campers. Jen had gone ahead. Rachel turned for just a second, only to find Jen gone. In her place, a figure that looked like her, moving stiffly through the fog. Rachel ran. She thought she heard Marcus's voice calling her back. But it wasn't him. As the fire burned low, Marcus noticed something etched into the dirt by the fire pit. It hadn't been there before. Words carved deep, like with a knife or claw. Diduidot eat 8LLOFWU. Just as the last ember died, the fire was dead. The message in the dirt stared up at them, as though it had been waiting for their eyes to find it. W-E, Do-E-D-A-L-O-F-U-O-U. No one spoke for a long time. Rachel crouched beside the letters, tracing them with her fingers like she didn't believe they were real. Marcus felt sick. The words weren't just a threat. They were a promise. One of them wouldn't be leaving this place. Derek stood and scanned the tree line, his silhouette twitching slightly in the low moonlight. It knows we're scared. That's what it wants. It feeds off us. Splits us up. Wears our faces. Marcus kept his voice low. Then what now? We sit and wait to be picked off one by one. No, Rachel said, finally standing. Her voice was dry, almost hollow. We find Jen. Marcus hesitated. Are you sure she's even still? Rachel turned on him, eyes sharp and wet. Don't you dare say it. She's out there. I know it. Marcus didn't push further. But in the back of his mind, doubt whispered, what if the forest already has her? Still, he couldn't abandon her. Not again. Then we go, Derek said. Now, while it's quiet, They packed quickly. No tents, no excess gear. Just what they could carry. They left the message in the dirt behind. But it followed them anyway, echoing in their heads with every step they took into the dark. They moved fast, no longer trying to follow a trail. There wasn't one. The forest had stopped pretending to be ordinary. The trees were different now. Their bark was slick and damp, glistening in the moonlight. Some bent unnaturally, leaning inward like they were watching. A few bore deep claw, like gouges, and in one particularly twisted trunk, Marcus saw what looked like a human eye, blinking slowly before vanishing into the bark. The forest floor had changed too. Less dirt, more rock. Mushrooms the size of dinner plates clustered in shadows. And every now and then, they'd hear a crack, like a branch breaking. But no wind moved the trees. Just when Marcus was sure they'd walked in a wide circle again, Rachel stopped. "There," she whispered. Ahead, a small clearing opened. In the middle stood a stone structure, round, low, and crumbling. An old well, covered in vines. The stone glistened with moisture. It looked ancient. Derek stepped forward. This wasn't on any map. Rachel had gone pale. "She's down there." "I know she is." Marcus didn't ask how she knew. The moment he looked at the well, he felt it too. Something was beneath them, alive, watching and waiting. They approached carefully. The well had no rope, no bucket, just a black circle in the middle of the forest. Marcus leaned in and felt a strange pressure in his ears, like the air was thicker here. He dropped a small rock into the hole. No sound. Nothing. Rachel didn't wait. She pulled a flashlight from her pack and aimed it down into the darkness. The beam went maybe 15 feet before vanishing entirely. "I'm going," she said. Derek stepped in front of her. "Are you out of your mind? That thing could go for miles. You'd never get out. She could be alive down there. Or something wants you to think she is." Rachel shoved him. "Then don't follow me." Before anyone could stop her, she swung one leg over the edge and began to lower herself inside. "Rachel?" Marcus grabbed her wrist. "There's no ladder, no rope. You'll fall." Her eyes met his. "Then let go." He held her another second, then pulled her back. She screamed, furious, and punched his chest. "She's down there!" "I heard her?" She called my name. Marcus stared into her. And if that wasn't her, that silenced her. Derek was already circling the well, searching the base. "There's something here." He crouched beside a mossy section of stone. With both hands he peeled away the wet vegetation, revealing a rusted metal hatch. Old, bolted shut. Rachel dropped beside him. A service entrance. Or a maintenance shaft. Derek muttered. "If this used to connect to old tunnels, maybe even mines." Marcus gave him a look. What is this place? But none of them had an answer. They worked at the bolts using a small hatchet Derek had brought. The metal creaked and groaned, but finally gave way with a snap. The hatch opened into blackness, exhaling cold air that smelled of earth and something else. Something sweet, like rotting fruit. Marcus clicked on his flashlight. "Well, I guess this is the part where we go underground." Rachel didn't hesitate this time. She crawled in first. The tunnel sloped down sharply. It was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. The air got colder as they descended, the smell intensifying until Marcus had to cover his mouth to keep from gagging. Roots jutted from the ceiling like claws. Occasionally, they brushed Marcus's hair or scraped Derek's back. The walls were rough stone, at least at first. Then they changed. The stone gave way to something smoother. Carved, symbols. Strange runes etched deep into the passageway walls. Shapes that hurt the eyes if stared at too long. Some glowed faintly, pulsing like veins beneath the surface. Rachel kept moving, flashlight aimed straight ahead. Marcus whispered, "What is this place?" Derek answered without looking, "It's not natural. This was built." Behu, silence. Then Rachel said, "I think we're going to find out." They reached a chamber. circular, tall, with a vaulted ceiling lost in darkness, and in the center, chained to the floor, was a mirror, or something that looked like one, 7 feet tall, framed in bone. Its surface was not glass, but black and liquid, like oil suspended in midair. It rippled gently, even without wind. Marcus approached slowly, unable to look away. Then he saw his reflection. Except it wasn't doing what he was. It stood still, eyes wide, unblinking. Then it smiled. Marcus stumbled back. "That's not a mirror," he muttered. Rachel walked to it, tears rising. Jen. The surface shifted. A new figure appeared. Jen, her face pale, eyes desperate. She pressed her hands against the oily surface. "Rachel," she whispered. "Help me?" "It won't let me go." Rachel reached for her. Derek grabbed her wrist. "Don't. That's how it gets you." "I can see her." Marcus looked again. Jen was crying now. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Behind her, something shifted. A long shape, insectile, moving just outside the reflection's reach. Then, another face appeared. It was Rachel's, standing behind Jen. Mouth grinning too wide, eyes black. Rachel recoiled. Jen's image flickered, then vanished. The mirror went still. Marcus stared at it. "I think this is it," he said. "The heart. Whatever this forest is, this is its core. It pulls people in, shows them what they want. Then it copies them." Derek pointed to the ceiling. The roots up above weren't roots, they were nerves, feeding into the mirror. "This isn't just a thing," Derek whispered. "It's alive." The ground trembled. Something was waking up. A deep moan echoed from the tunnel behind them, and from the mirror. Hands began to press against the surface. Too many hands, and none of them human. The hands clawed at the surface of the mirror. Not real hands, not human ones, at least. Each had too many fingers, elongated and sharp. Some lacked skin altogether, exposing slick, black tissue that pulsed in rhythm with a deep, throbbing sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Marcus stepped back, dragging Rachel with him. Derek raised the hatchet, but even he looked unsure whether it would do any good. Then the mirror cracked, just once. A thin, spiderweb fracture radiated from the center, and a sound, like metal groaning underwater, echoed through the chamber. "We'll have to move," Marcus said, pulling Rachel toward the tunnel. "No," Rachel hissed.
"We can't leave her. She's not in there. Not really,"
he shouted. But even as he said it, Marcus wasn't entirely sure. Because he'd seen Jen, he'd heard her voice. And something inside that mirror had remembered her, mimicked her perfectly. The hands withdrew, slipping back into the oily black surface. Silence. Then the mirror began to melt. It started from the top, the thick liquid surface dripping downward like hot wax. The frame cracked and buckled, bones turning soft and wet. Whatever had kept it solid, anchored, was breaking down. Derek turned to the others. "Run." Now. They ran. Back through the tunnel, up the sharp incline, light bouncing off the walls as they scrambled past runes that now pulsed red. The forest's breath followed them. Wet. Hot. Like something huge just below the surface. Marcus's flashlight flickered. Behind them came a sound, not footsteps. Something crawling. Fast. Scraping. Clawing. "Don't look back," Derek snapped. Rachel tripped once, screamed, and Marcus caught her by the arm, yanking her to her feet.
"Almost there. Keep going."
They burst through the hatch, into the night air, but the forest wasn't the same. The trees had moved. Where before there'd been clearings and moonlight, now there were gnarled trunks pressed tightly together. Branches weaved like fingers into a cage. There was no way back to camp, no way out, and the well was gone. Rachel turned in place, panicked. No, it was right here. It was? We just came out of it? Gone. As if it had never been there. Marcus turned to Derek. Or did it move? Or did we? Derek was scanning the trees. Don't think it matters anymore. Because something was coming through them. Not from the trees. As the trees. The bark began to move, slithering in slow spirals. Branches uncurled into limbs. Trunks cracked open like mouths. Eyes blinked open where knots used to be. The forest was watching. Then something stepped between the trees. It looked like Jen. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her arms too long. Skin too pale, too perfect. She wore the same hoodie she'd had when she vanished. But there was no breath, no warmth in her eyes. Rachel froze. Jen. Rachel? The thing said. Her voice was right. Soft, choked with emotion. I waited for you. Marcus moved in front of Rachel. Don't, he warned. But Rachel took a step forward anyway. The imitation Jen smiled. Behind her, more figures emerged. All of them looked familiar. Old friends. Former classmates. Faces from home. But none of them blinked. Derek raised his hatchet. It knows us. It remembers who we are. Marcus whispered. It's not mimicking anymore. It's becoming. The trees closed in. And the ground split open. A great, yawning crevice tore through the forest floor, revealing a massive hollow beneath, like a buried cathedral with roots dangling like chandeliers. Something was breathing down there, rhythmic, deep, a presence, a consciousness. Marcus heard it, not as sound, but as thought. I remember you. I have all of you as remember. Images flashed in his mind, a younger version of himself, lost in the woods as a child. A moment he'd forgotten, crying, shivering, staring at something in the trees. A shape that had comforted him. The same voice, the same warmth. It had been there all along, not stalking them, raising them. Rachel was on her knees now, covering her ears, whispering, "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." Derek threw the hatchet. It passed through one of the imitation figures, hitting a tree behind it. The figure didn't flinch. It just stared. Marcus grabbed Rachel and pulled her up. "We have to go. There's no more safe. Just movement." They turned and ran. Again. But this time, the forest let them go. It wanted them to see. They emerged into another clearing, but not like before. This one had structures. Not tents, buildings, concrete and rusted metal, a collapsed observation tower, an old chain link fence swallowed by vines. A weather-beaten sign lay half buried in dirt. Pro per of a Aurora pro JCT restriciter persid. Marcus froze. "I've seen this before," he whispered. "My dad, he worked security at some site years ago. I saw this logo on his files. He said it was decommissioned after a containment failure." Derek moved toward the ruins. A lab. Or an experiment station. Rachel looked between them. "You're telling me someone built this place knowing what was here?" Marcus nodded. "Or trying to contain it." Inside one of the crumbling labs, they found stacks of ruined folders, mold-eaten papers, and shattered monitors. But on one wall, untouched by time, a blackboard held a phrase scrawled in red chalk. "It does not forget. It does not forgive. It only waits." Rachel stepped closer to the board, her voice shaking. "This thing, it's not just a creature. It's a memory. Made flesh." Derek pulled open a rusted filing cabinet. Inside, beneath plastic sleeves, were photographs. Dozens of them. People smiling in front of tents. Park rangers, campers. Then photos of bodies. Twisted. Identical, some of the same people. Duplicated. Posed in impossible ways. One photo showed a man split down the middle, but both halves smiling. Rachel dropped the folder and backed away. "We were never supposed to come here." Marcus felt it too. They hadn't stumbled on a haunted forest. They had wandered into the graveyard of a failed prison, and the thing they'd let out. It remembered everything. Outside, the forest grew louder. A chorus of voices rose from the trees. Not just Rachel's name now, but Marcus's, Derek's, their own voices, pleading, crying, begging to be let in. Rachel clutched Marcus's arm. "It's using our memories to wear us down." "Then we can't trust anything we see," Derek said. Suddenly, gunshots. 3 sharp, echoing cracks. They weren't alone. They followed the noise and found someone. A man, tall, grizzled, wearing tattered ranger gear. He stood beside a burning tree, holding a shotgun. His face was weathered, eyes bloodshot. You brought it back, he said. Marcus stepped forward. Who are you? Name's Nolan. I was part of the cleanup crew. 32 years ago. Rachel stepped closer. Then you know what this is. Nolan stared into the flames. It's not a what. It's a who, or was. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? It used to be a girl, Nolan said. Lost in these woods. Abandoned. Nobody ever found her. She died scared, angry, forgotten. Rachel's face went white. And this thing. It's her memory. Grown wild. Fed by sorrow. Made of everything we try to bury. He turned to them. And once you meet her, she never lets go. She never lets go. Nolan's voice seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Not angry. Not fearful. Just resigned. The others stared at him. The flames behind him crackling as if reacting to his words. Rachel swallowed. You said she used to be a girl. What happened to her? Nolan turned slowly to face them. That's the thing. No one really knows. We only found what she became. 32 years ago, a child went missing in these woods. Her name was Anna Merrill. She was 7. Brown hair. Big green eyes, last seen playing near the ranger's cabin while her father, part of the park's maintenance crew, worked a double shift. She vanished between 2 breaths. The search lasted 6 days. Dogs, helicopters, thermal scans, nothing. It was as if she'd been plucked out of existence. Some claimed she ran away. Others whispered darker theories. Her mother spiraled. Her father never came back to work. But the weird part, Nolan muttered, the forest changed after she disappeared. Changed how? Paths that used to lead out started looping in. Rangers got turned around in daylight. People said they heard her, whispering for help. That's when they shut the area down. Quietly. Covered it up. Built the Aurora station to monitor whatever was growing. Marcus rubbed his eyes. You're saying this memory, this force, it's Anna. What's left of her? Or what she became, maybe. Nolan lowered his shotgun. She feeds on memory. On being remembered. That's why she takes your faces, your voices. She doesn't want to be forgotten again. Derek paced. So how do we stop it? You don't? Nolan said flatly. But you might buy time. That night, they stayed in the remains of the Aurora station. Not because it was safe, just less unsafe. The place was decaying from within. Floor tiles curled, ceiling panels rotted, mold climbing up the walls like veins. But it was quiet. Almost. Rachel found an old bunk room and sat on one of the beds, staring at the floor. Marcus sat beside her. You okay? She gave a hollow laugh. You asking me that feels like asking if the forest is feeling sociable tonight. He almost smiled. Almost. But the truth was, something inside both of them had shifted. The woods had peeled away a layer that shouldn't have been touched. I keep thinking about her, Rachel whispered. Anna. Lost. Alone. No one hearing her cry for help. Marcus said nothing, because he remembered too. When he was 10, he'd gotten separated from his parents on a camping trip. Only for 10 minutes. But it had felt like hours. And he had cried. And something had answered. That night, Marcus dreamed of the mirror. It wasn't broken this time. It was whole. Waiting. He stood before it, and his reflection stepped forward. It smiled, wide and wrong. I remember when you were kind. It whispered the words with his voice, but it wasn't him. Not anymore. I remember when you cried under the porch and wished your father dead. The reflection blinked. I remember what you buried. Marcus tried to look away, but the mirror moved with him, like it was the only surface in the world. You don't forget me, Marcus, and now you never will. He woke with a start. Sweat cold on his neck, his throat dry. Rachel and Derek were still asleep. Nolan sat at the end of the corridor, staring into the dark. Marcus joined him. You don't sleep. Nolan shook his head. She doesn't like when I do. Marcus leaned against the wall. Why are you still here? The old ranger stared forward. Someone has to remember her. Then, softer, or she'll leave the forest. They left at dawn. Nolan claimed he knew a path, one last trail that hadn't been turned inside out yet. If we move fast and quiet, we can slip out before she wakes. Rachel eyed him. Wakes. She sleeps sometimes, Nolan said. That's when the woods go quiet. The trees stop breathing. But when she wakes up again, they didn't need the rest of the sentence. They walked in silence. Birds didn't sing. The wind didn't move. Even the sound of their boots on moss felt loud. Derek carried the hatchet. Nolan led with the shotgun, muttering directions under his breath. But the deeper they went, the less right things became. A deer stood perfectly still, its eyes too wide, unmoving. A squirrel watched them from a tree, but it didn't blink. Every animal in the woods had gone still. Rachel stopped. This path. Wasn't there a stream here? There had been. Now it was a dried bed filled with teeth. Small ones, hundreds of them, children's teeth. Marcus turned away, bile rising in his throat. Nolan didn't stop walking. Don't look. That's how she talks. They reached a clearing just as the wind picked up. But it wasn't natural wind. It was breath. Hot, measured, coming from below. And in the center of the clearing was a single swing set, rusted and alone. One swing moved gently, swaying. Nolan froze. His face, always grim, turned pale. Run. But it was too late. The swing stopped, and the earth cracked open beneath it. Roots exploded from the ground, reaching like fingers. Trees bent backward, forming a circle, branches locking together like a twisted crown. From the pit rose a figure. Not a child. Not anymore. A girl's outline, dressed in a tattered nightgown, but her face was a void. Not empty. Full of faces. Shifting, morphing. All the people she had touched, taken, worn. Eyes opened across her chest. Mouths whispered from her back. And she screamed. A sound like 100 children sobbing in unison. Derek raised the hatchet but froze. His mother's face looked back at him from her chest. Rachel covered her ears, shaking violently. Marcus felt her inside his skull, peeling memories like fruit. His first heartbreak, his worst lie, his quietest shame, then a voice. I know you. Nolan stepped forward. He held something in his hand, a matchbook. He struck one. Fire hissed. He whispered, I'm sorry, Anna, and dropped it into the roots. The ground erupted in flame. The creature shrieked, spinning, faces wailing, bodies twisting. The trees screamed with her. Marcus grabbed Rachel and ran. Derek followed, dragging Nolan. The fire didn't spread naturally. It chased them, roots catching like fuses, setting the forest ablaze in glowing veins. Behind them, the girl of faces melted into the soil, but her voice chased them still. You remember me. You'll always remember me. They burst into sunlight. Real sunlight. Not filtered through trees. A road. A real road. Rachel collapsed to her knees weeping. Derek stood in disbelief, then dropped the hatchet and let out a strangled laugh. Marcus turned. Nolan stood at the tree line, watching. You coming? Marcus asked. Nolan shook his head. I belong to her now. And he stepped back. The forest closed behind him. Gone. They walked until they reached a ranger station. Real people. Real phones. Real vehicles. They were safe. For now. But that night, as Marcus tried to sleep in a sterile hospital cot, he saw a reflection in the mirror above the sink. A girl. Not smiling. Just waiting. They told him it was over. Doctors called it shock. Trauma. Hallucinations brought on by dehydration. Exposure. Stress. The forest fire was real. They'd seen the satellite images. But as for faces and trees and a girl made of whispers, no trace. No proof. No Anna. Just a burned clearing. Some cracked roots, and one rusted swing. 3 days later, Marcus sat in a psych evaluation room. Pale green walls. A two-way mirror. A woman in her 50s with a clipboard and too much perfume. How are you sleeping? She asked, glancing up without smiling. Marcus stared at the mirrored glass behind her. There's someone in the reflection. The woman's pen paused. You mean you feel like someone's watching? No. He met her eyes. I see her. She didn't say anything at first. Then, you know trauma can distort. I'm not confused. Marcus said, voice sharper than he meant. She's in the glass. Sometimes behind me. Sometimes wearing me. The woman's eyes twitched. She made a small note. He didn't care. Elsewhere, Rachel sat on her hospital bed, knees tucked to her chest. She hadn't spoken since the woods. Not to the staff. Not to Marcus. Not even to Derek. She kept her head turned away from the window always. When a nurse asked why, she finally whispered, "There's a reflection at night." Off what? Not me. The nurse adjusted her IV and gave a practiced smile. Rachel didn't sleep that night, because at midnight, the glass pane in her window showed a young girl with brown hair and green eyes, smiling a little too wide, whispering, "Remember me. Please, remember me." Derek handled it differently. He drank. A lot. 3 nights after the hospital, he broke into a liquor store and got arrested trying to light a bonfire on the beach. They found him screaming at the flames.
She's in the goddamn water now!
The tide's not ours anymore! No one understood. No one could. Except Marcus. A week passed. They were released. No charges. No forced therapy. Just polite nods and 2 long stares. The kind given to survivors no one believed, Marcus, Rachel. And Derek met at a diner near the edge of the forest line. They barely spoke during the meal, until Marcus finally said, "She's not done." Rachel flinched. You've seen her too. And mirrors. Windows. Even puddles. Derek stared at his coffee. She's spreading. Like a memory that won't stay buried. They all looked at one another. Different paths. Same conclusion. They had left the forest. But she hadn't stayed behind. That night, Marcus returned to his apartment. Everything was normal. Lights on. TV playing static he didn't remember turning on. He turned it off. In the black screen, his reflection smiled. But he wasn't smiling. The reflection opened its mouth. "I know your voice. I wear it sometimes." Marcus hurled the remote. The screen shattered. Glass rained down, and in every shard. Her eyes blinked back at him. They regrouped the next day. At Marcus's place, Derek came with a bottle and a duffel bag full of tools. Rachel came with a notebook. She'd been documenting everything. Dates, times, words spoken. "I think we're haunted," she said, "but not by a ghost, by something living." "An idea," Marcus muttered. "A viral memory." Rachel nodded. "She doesn't just want to be remembered. She needs it. It's how she grows." Derek poured a drink. "So how do we unremember her?" No one answered. Rachel opened her notebook to the last page. Scrawled across it, in a child's handwriting none of them remembered writing, "Don't forget me." She tore the page out. Burned it in the sink. The smoke curled up, smelling like pine. Then something screeched from the drain. A high, thin wail, like a child locked in a closet. That night, Marcus dreamt again. He was in the clearing. Except it was endless now. Sky replaced by trees, ground by ash. A swing creaked behind him. He didn't turn around. The voice whispered, "Why did you leave me?" "I didn't know how to stay." The voice came closer. "Will you remember me now?" Marcus turned. Anna stood there. No faces on her this time. Just one. Her own. Dirty. Hollow-eyed, sad. "You were the first to see me." He shook his head. "No. I wasn't even born when you..." But she smiled. "Time doesn't move the same here." Then she lunged. He woke gasping. Blood on his hands. But it wasn't his. And the mirror in the bathroom had a word smeared across it. "Stia," Rachel called moments later. "I think I know where she lives," she whispered. "We're not in the woods anymore." Her voice cracked. "She's in us." They met at dawn. Same clearing. Or what was left of it. Blackened trees. No birds. No wind. But the swing was back. And it moved on its own. Rachel stepped forward. "She's anchored to us. Through memory. Through guilt. That's why she won't leave." Marcus nodded. "Then we sever it." Derek lit a torch. Let's burn every piece. They started with the notebooks, the drawings, the tools, everything tied to that place. The smoke rose, bitter and sharp, and the forest screamed again. Roots burst upward, clawing. Faces emerged in bark. Anna stepped out from the trees. But she wasn't pleading now. She was angry. "You want to forget me?" Marcus stepped forward. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. "I remember you, Anna. I do. But I won't let you have me." He held up a shard of mirror. Her reflection showed her as a child, before the forest took her. She screamed and shattered. Silence fell. Rachel gasped. The trees stilled. The ground stopped breathing. Derek looked around. "She's gone." No one answered. Because in Marcus's hand, the mirror shard still pulsed, and in it, Anna opened her eyes and smiled. Marcus didn't sleep, not because he couldn't, because he was afraid to. The mirror shard on his desk never stopped humming. At first, it was subtle, just a low vibration, barely perceptible unless you were near. Then it started pulsing, breathing. At midnight, it bled. He kept it in a locked box, wrapped in cloth, inside a drawer. But the lock turned by itself. The cloth unraveled, and the drawer creaked open. Even when he wasn't in the room, especially then. Rachel came over the next morning, pale and jittery. "There's something you need to see." She handed him her phone, a photo, taken during the fire. It showed the swing set scorched, nothing unusual, until you zoomed in. In the corner of the frame, inside the smoke, was a face, not screaming, not melting, smiling. Anna, looking right at the lens. Rachel scrolled to the metadata. The photo had been taken by her phone, but she didn't remember taking it, didn't even remember holding her phone during the fire. And yet, there it was. Time stamped, stored, waiting, like Anna had wanted to be found. Marcus turned to the box. "She's not in the forest anymore. She's hitchhiking through anything that reflects." Rachel's eyes widened. "That's how she got out." He nodded. "And now she's looking for windows back in." Rachel leaned against the wall, breathing fast. "It's like she's viral. No, worse. She's an infestation. A memory parasite," Marcus added, "and we're the hosts." Later that day, Derek called. He was holed up in a motel 2 counties over, away from glass, water, screens, anything reflective. "You were right," he said, voice shaky. "I took down every mirror in this place. But last night," he trailed off. "What?" Marcus asked. "I caught her in my shadow." Silence. He continued. "It moved before I did, stared at me from the wall. And then it smiled." Marcus swallowed. "She's spreading past reflections." "No," Derek whispered. "I think she's getting stronger, learning." Then the line went dead. Marcus and Rachel drove straight to the motel. They found Derek's room trashed, lights shattered, walls scratched, the bed soaked with water. But no Derek, just a wet handprint on the mirror's broken frame, and the message, "You left me again." They drove back in silence. Rachel stared out the window. "She's consuming our memories of her," she murmured, "feeding on them. The more we remember, the stronger she gets." Marcus clenched the wheel. "So we forget." Rachel looked at him. "You can't just choose to forget trauma." "No," he said, "but we can rewrite it." They dug up old photos, printed them, held bonfires, replaced every memory of Anna with something, someone else. In every group picture, they drew over her face. In every journal entry, they scratched out her name and wrote, "Lily." They whispered new stories into the smoke, lied to their own minds, and hoped it would be enough. At first it worked. No more reflections, no more whispers, no more dreams. But something still felt off, like a draft you can't find, a door left open somewhere in the house. Then Rachel stopped answering calls. Marcus found her apartment abandoned, lights off, food rotting. On her desk, her notebook lay open. The last page read, "She's already inside." The mirror in Marcus's hallway cracked that night, not from impact, from pressure. like something behind it was pressing forward, trying to come through. He covered it with a sheet, then nailed plywood over the whole thing. Still, he heard her. Whispers in the hallway, lauder in the sink, her voice in the toilet bowl. "Don't forget me, Marcus. You're the only one left." He called Rachel's parents. They hadn't heard from her either. Derek's number, disconnected. Marcus checked into a hotel. No mirrors, no TVs. He showered with the lights off, covered his phone's screen with tape. But she came anyway, through himself. It started with a twitch. His fingers would move before he told them to. He'd speak a word and not remember why. One night, in a daze, he found himself staring into a spoon. Her eyes blinked back. He reached out to a researcher in dream psychology, a man named Dr. Kessler who had worked on cognitive echoes from shared hallucinations in trauma victims. When they met, Marcus explained everything, not the supernatural parts, just enough to make it sound like persistent hallucinations. Kessler listened carefully, then said, "You're not crazy. What you're describing matches a phenomenon we've seen in survivors of shared tragedy. Sometimes a memory, form, a personified embodiment of the trauma, emerges as a coping mechanism." Marcus leaned forward. "But can it move between people, grow stronger?" Kessler hesitated. There was one case, in 1993, 3 survivors of a cave collapse reported seeing the same figure in dreams. One by one, they committed suicide. The last wrote a note, "She walks between us now." Marcus froze. What was her name? Kessler looked through his files. Anna Graves. Marcus left the building in a blur. He didn't go home. He didn't go back to the hotel. He drove straight to the clearing, or where it used to be. The trees were regrowing, but something was wrong. They leaned inward now, as if hiding something, protecting it, or trapping it. He stood in the middle of the ring, holding a mirror shard. "Come on," he whispered. "I know you're still in there." The wind picked up, leaves swirled, and then Anna appeared, older now, not the child from before. She looked 17, maybe 18, same eyes, same smile. "You finally came back," she said. "I didn't have a choice." She stepped closer. "You always had a choice, but you chose to forget. You weren't real." I am. You gave me shape. And now," she held out her hand. "I want your face." Marcus didn't move. She stepped closer. The ground cracked beneath her feet. Bark peeled from trees. Smoke seeped from her mouth. "Give it to me," she hissed. He raised the shard. Her reflection glitched. "Remember me as a child," he said. She shook her head. "I've grown. You helped me." "No," he whispered. "I trapped you here." He drove the shard into the earth and screamed her name. Not Anna. Lily, the false one, the rewritten one. He forced the lie so loud into the ground it rippled. Anna screamed. The clearing trembled. The trees bent. And then silence. Marcus woke up on the ground. Nightfall. The trees were gone. Just ash. He stood. No whisper, no laughter, no swing. He checked his pockets. No mirror, no shard, no Rachel, no Derek. He returned home. Slept, dreamless, until 3 nights later. He turned on the bathroom light. The mirror was whole again, and from it, Anna smiled, older still. "You forgot me," she said. Tears welled in her eyes. "But I never forgot you." Marcus couldn't remember falling asleep. He was still sitting on the edge of the bed, his eyes wide, the reflection of the bathroom mirror staring back at him. The last thing he remembered was shutting the bathroom door. But now, it was wide open. "Anna." He whispered her name, his voice hoarse. There was no reply. Just the sound of his own breath, shallow and quick. He stood up and moved slowly toward the mirror, like a man trading carefully across a trap. His heart was pounding in his chest. He reached out and touched the glass. Cold. Nothing but the silence. It pressed against him, thick and suffocating. The next morning, Marcus found himself pacing in the living room, his mind foggy. The memory of Anna's face still lingered in his mind, like a trace of a nightmare he couldn't shake. He glanced at the clock, almost noon, and realized he hadn't slept. Not a single minute. His thoughts were consumed with the lingering question, how had she gotten back into his life? The phone buzzed. Rachel's name. His hands shook as he picked it up. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Her voice sounded strained, breathless. I don't know how to explain this, but I saw her again. In the reflection of my window, the cold dread that had settled in his stomach tightened. What happened? Rachel didn't answer right away. When she spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. She's not just in mirrors anymore, Marcus. She's moving through everything. Windows, screens. I don't even know what's real anymore. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. She's toying with us. We have to stop her. For good. Marcus, I think it's too late for that. Rachel paused, as if she was listening to something on the other end. I think she's already inside me. Marcus dropped the phone and bolted for his coat. He didn't even think about it. He just grabbed his keys and ran. He couldn't lose Rachel. Not like this. He reached her apartment within minutes, but when he knocked, there was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time.
Rachel! I know you're in there!
Still, nothing. His heart raced as panic started to creep in. The silence was too thick, too complete. He forced the door open. The apartment was in complete darkness, but he felt her presence. Somewhere in the dark. Rachel. He called, voice trembling. His eyes strained to adjust, but it was like the darkness had consumed everything. Then he saw it. In the reflection of the window, behind him, her face, Rachel. But something was wrong. Her eyes were empty, hollow. A vacant smile spread across her face, and she spoke, but not in Rachel's voice. Do you remember, Marcus? The voice was cold, the words sharp as if they weren't even her own. He spun around, heart racing, his throat dry, but the apartment was empty. Rachel was gone. The mirror flashed. Anna's face, clear as day, then it was gone. Marcus stumbled backward, his legs giving out beneath him. He hit the floor with a loud thud, his mind reeling. It's not Rachel, he gasped, his voice strangled. It's not her anymore. A low laugh echoed in the darkness, sending chills down his spine. Then he heard it. Her voice, from behind him. I'm not done yet, Marcus. His breath caught in his throat as he scrambled to his feet. Looking around frantically, he didn't know what was real anymore. The reflection in the window shifted. There she was again. But this time, Anna wasn't smiling. She was staring at him, eyes full of something darker. Come closer, the voice whispered, like it was right beside him, even though she wasn't. He turned toward the window. His pulse hammered in his ears. The glass seemed to distort, rippling as though someone was pushing against it from the other side. You can't escape, the voice continued. I'll always find you, Marcus. But there was no time for fear. He had to find Rachel. He had to find a way to stop this. The drive to Rachel's childhood home was unbearable. Every passing second felt like it stretched into an eternity. He had no idea what he was walking into, no idea what he was about to face. But he had to. The house was just as he remembered it. Quiet. Still. An abandoned shell of a family home. He knocked, but there was no answer. He tried the door, but it was locked. Frustrated, he forced the door open and stepped inside. The silence hit him like a weight. Nothing was out of place. Except the mirror. It was standing against the wall in the hallway, reflecting nothing. Not a single movement. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He stepped toward it, trembling. A figure emerged from the reflection. Not Anna, not Rachel, but something else. A twisted, contorted version of himself, grinning from ear to ear. And then it spoke. You think you can run from me? Marcus turned and ran out of the house, heart pounding. The world was spinning around him. The trees swayed, casting long, unsettling shadows. He couldn't outrun it. He couldn't outrun her. Night fell. The forest was quiet, except for the sound of footsteps. Marcus was back in the clearing, and the mirror was waiting for him. Anna's face appeared once again, her eyes glistening. "You came back," she whispered, her voice both cold and inviting. "I never stopped waiting." He took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "I'm not running anymore." And before she could respond, he shattered the mirror with his bare hands. Glass rained down in a storm of sharp edges, cutting into his skin. But he didn't care. He had to end it. He collapsed to his knees, panting, the pain in his hands ignored. And then, as the last piece of glass fell to the ground, the silence returned, but only for a moment. It wasn't over. Not yet. The woods were silent. Too silent. Marcus stood in the clearing. Surrounded by shards of glass, the remnants of the shattered mirror glittering on the ground. His hands were cut, blood dripping down to mix with the dirt beneath him, but he hardly noticed. His chest was tight, breath shallow, as if the very air around him was suffocating him. It's over. He kept telling himself, even as his mind screamed for answers. It has to be over. But something wasn't right. The darkness had deepened in the forest, shadows creeping into the edges of his vision. He stood frozen, his eyes darting around. The wind whispered through the trees, but it felt wrong. Too familiar, and then he heard it. A whisper. It was soft at first, as though carried on the wind, but it grew louder, closer. "You can't run, Marcus." His blood ran cold. He spun around, searching the darkness, but saw nothing. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as if something invisible was pushing down on him. "You can't hide from me forever." The voice was everywhere. In the trees, in the air, in his mind. His breath caught in his throat. He stumbled backward, his foot hitting something. Another shard of glass. It dug into his heel, and he let out a strangled gasp, but he barely noticed the pain. The voice was all that mattered. "I never left," it whispered, slithering through his thoughts. "I've been waiting, Marcus, watching." It was Anna's voice, but it wasn't. The shadows around him seemed to deepen. The forest was closing in, pressing against him from all sides. "Why did you run?" The voice continued, its tone soft and mocking. "You can't escape what's inside you. It was always inside you." Marcus's head spun. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. He had shattered the mirror. He had ended it, didn't he? "You don't even know what you've done." The voice whispered. "You can't fix it, Marcus. You can never fix it." The darkness seemed to rise, like tendrils curling up from the ground, wrapping around his legs, pulling him deeper into the earth. "This is your fault," the voice hissed. "You brought me here." Marcus's mind raced. This isn't real. None of this is real. He was losing himself in the fog. He had to focus. He had to get out of here. But the more he tried to move, the more the shadows tightened around him. "You've already seen too much," Anna's voice murmured. "There's no turning back now." Marcus felt his legs give way, his body sinking into the earth as the shadows swirled around him. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his mouth. His eyes were wide with terror as he fought against the darkness, but it was futile. The ground beneath him shifted, opening up, swallowing him whole. "No!" A flash of light. Suddenly, the air changed. The heavy weight lifted. Marcus gasped for breath, his lungs burning as he stumbled forward, his knees buckling beneath him. The shadows receded, retreating into the forest, leaving nothing but the crushing silence. But he wasn't in the clearing anymore. He stood in the middle of a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling at the edges. The air smelled of mildew and dust. It was suffocatingly still, and his footsteps echoed as he moved forward, unsure of what had just happened. What is this place? He turned, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, the hallway stretched out endlessly, with no sign of where it began or ended. Only the sound of his own breath filled the empty space. He wasn't alone. A soft shuffle echoed from behind him. Marcus froze. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. It's Anna, he thought, his pulse racing. He could feel her presence like a weight pressing against him. She was there, watching him. But when he slowly turned his head, he saw nothing. Nothing but darkness. The hallway stretched out before him like an endless maze, twisting and turning in impossible directions. He took a step forward, then another, his body trembling with fear. But he couldn't stop himself. The silence around him was deafening, crushing. And then, just as he thought he might break, he heard it. A door. A door that hadn't been there before. It was ajar, the faintest light spilling through the crack. His heart skipped a beat. He moved toward it, his steps quickening. There was something pulling him forward, something that compelled him to open it. When he reached for the handle, the door creaked open on its own. Inside was a room. But not just any room. It was his childhood bedroom. The same one he'd left behind all those years ago. He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The furniture was the same, old, worn, and familiar. His bed was tucked in the corner, the covers a little too neat, the way his mother had always made them. The desk, the bookshelves, the window looking out over the yard, it was all too familiar. But something was wrong. There, on the bed, was a figure. A small, huddled form. Marcus's heart stopped. Rachel. He moved closer, his breath catching in his throat. The figure didn't move. When he reached the bed, he could see the person clearly. It wasn't Rachel. It was Anna. Her eyes were closed, her hands folded neatly over her chest, but she was alive. Still. Frozen in time. Her pale face was marked with something he couldn't quite make out, but it was the expression on her face that haunted him the most. A faint smile that looked almost content. "You shouldn't have come back," a voice whispered from the shadows. It was cold, empty. Marcus spun around, but no one was there. The walls are closing in. His head began to spin as memories flooded his mind. Whispers of things he had tried so hard to forget. Faces, voices, fragments of his past, and the laughter. The laughter that wouldn't stop. "It's not over, Marcus." The voice echoed in his head, pulling him deeper into the nightmare. "It's never over." Marcus felt his chest tightening as he stared at Anna's lifeless form, still lying on the bed. He couldn't bring himself to look away. Her pale face a grotesque reflection of what he had tried so desperately to leave behind. This isn't real. It can't be real. But the air in the room was thick with something he couldn't explain, a presence pressing down on him, smothering him in its cold embrace. Every part of him screamed to run, but his feet felt frozen to the ground. The laughter. It was back. Louder, distant at first, then growing louder, rising from the shadows that seemed to move within the room. Swirling like smoke. It wasn't the laughter of a child, or even of Anna. No, this was something far darker. It was mocking, knowing. And then there was the voice. It whispered his name, soft and dangerous. Marcus. He turned, his body moving against his will, and his eyes locked on the door. It was wide open now. The dim hallway beyond beckoning him like a dark tunnel. The laughter grew louder. Marcus backed away from the bed, his heart pounding in his chest as the shadows seemed to pulse around him, closing in like a tightening noose. He was trapped. Every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into the nightmare. He had to leave. But as he turned to run, something caught his eye, something in the hallway beyond the door. A figure. It was a shadow, tall and shapeless, standing just out of reach of the dim light. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but somehow Marcus could feel its gaze on him, as if it was waiting for him to make the next move. The air was thick with anticipation. "It's not over, Marcus," the voice whispered again, now unmistakably familiar. Anna's voice. But it was wrong. So wrong. Marcus's hands trembled, his mind racing. He wasn't sure if he was imagining it, if he was still trapped in the dream. or whatever this was. But the figure in the hallway felt real. It wasn't just a trick of the light. The sensation of being watched was too real to ignore. His breath caught in his throat. The laughter stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Marcus swallowed hard, taking a step toward the figure. And as he did, the shadow began to move. Not toward him, but away from him, retreating into the dark corridor that stretched endlessly behind it. No, he didn't want to follow. But something inside him, something deep in the pit of his stomach, pushed him forward. He couldn't stop himself. The shadow was beckoning him, pulling him like a magnet, and he had no choice but to follow. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in, the darkness growing thicker. His skin crawled with the sensation of being surrounded, but he couldn't turn back now. He didn't dare. And then he saw it. A door. It was at the end of the hallway, an ancient, rusted door that seemed to absorb the light around it, swallowing it whole. The handle was broken, jagged, and the wood was warped with age, as if the door had been there for centuries. The shadow stopped just in front of it, waiting. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest as he moved closer, but the closer he got to the door, the more the air seemed to grow heavier, thicker. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cold, splintered wood, and then it opened. The door creaked loudly, the sound scraping against his eardrums, making his teeth ache. As it opened, a gust of wind rushed through the narrow space, chilling him to the bone. It smelled of decay and rot, and for a moment, Marcus felt like he might suffocate from the overpowering stench. The room beyond was dark, pitch black. But then, as if reacting to his presence, faint lights flickered, revealing walls covered in cracks, peeling paint, and strange symbols carved into the stone. Marcus stepped inside. As soon as his foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him, the force of it reverberating through the room. He spun around, but there was no way to open it. The door was solid, unyielding. And when he turned back, he saw it. The room was filled with mirrors. Dozens of them, arranged haphazardly, their surfaces cracked and warped. Each one reflected a different version of Marcus, though none of them looked quite like him. In one, his face was twisted in agony. In another, he was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Another reflected him as a child, crying, reaching out to someone he couldn't see. And at the far end of the room, one mirror stood out among the rest. It was large, towering over the others. The frame was gilded, ornate, and old. The glass was cracked, but still mostly intact. And it reflected a Marcus he didn't recognize. A Marcus that was standing beside Anna. His stomach churned. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the reflection. Anna was there, standing beside him, her arms wrapped around him, her eyes cold, unblinking. Her expression was unreadable, and the sight of her standing there alive made Marcus's blood run cold. No, he took a step forward, his heart racing. I never left, the voice whispered, the one that had followed him since the moment he set foot in the forest. I've always been with you. And then, it happened. The reflection of Anna in the mirror twisted, her face shifting into something monstrous. Her eyes blackened, her skin rippling, her mouth stretching into an impossibly wide grin. Marcus recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. You brought me here, Marcus, the voice hissed, rising in volume, distorting, becoming something darker. You can't escape me. You never could, Marcus screamed. He turned to run. But the mirrors seemed to close in around him, trapping him in their reflections, trapping him in his own mind. And just when he thought he might lose himself entirely, a voice broke through. Wake up, Marcus. He snapped his head toward the sound. But there was no one there. Marcus's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled backward, the world spinning around him. The mirrors, those twisted reflections, seemed to multiply, stretching across the walls in every direction. His heart hammered in his chest, and the air felt thick, suffocating, as though he were drowning in his own fear. This isn't real. It can't be. It can't. But the voice kept whispering in the corners of his mind, relentless, insistent. Wake up, Marcus. The words echoed in his skull, reverberating, taunting him. But Marcus couldn't respond. He couldn't even move. Every step he took felt as though the floor was shifting beneath him, pulling him deeper into the abyss. And the shadows, those dark shapes that had lurked in the corners of his vision since his arrival in the forest, grew stronger, more defined. What is happening to me? He staggered toward the mirror at the far end of the room, the one with the gilded frame and the cracked glass. Anna's reflection, distorted and monstrous, seemed to sneer at him, its wide, twisted grin stretching unnaturally across her face. Marcus reached out, his fingers trembling as they grazed the cold surface of the mirror. And then, everything shifted. The world around him rippled like water, distorting, warping. The reflection of Anna blinked, then, without warning, stepped out of the mirror. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He stumbled backward, his heart racing. He hadn't imagined it. The reflection had moved. It wasn't a reflection anymore. Anna stood before him, her once beautiful face now twisted in a grotesque parody of itself. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Her smile was wide, jagged, too sharp to be human. "You shouldn't have come, Marcus," she whispered, her voice a low, guttural growl. "You brought me here. You brought all of this into existence." Marcus backed away, his mind screaming for him to run, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. He couldn't move, couldn't look away from her. The words hung in the air, suffocating him. I don't understand. What do you mean?" His voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. Anna's eyes flickered with something darker. "You never understood, Marcus. You were always part of this, part of the plan." "What plan?" His voice cracked, panic creeping into his chest. He had to get out of there. He had to. But before he could react, Anna stepped forward, and the shadows in the room surged toward her, as if she were drawing power from them. Marcus's pulse raced in his ears, his mind a blur of confusion. And then everything went dark. For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no light, no sense of time. Just an empty, crushing void. Slowly, the darkness began to recede, and Marcus found himself standing in an unfamiliar place. He blinked, disoriented, and looked around. He was in a forest, but not the same forest. This one was different. The trees were twisted, their branches reaching like skeletal hands toward the sky. The ground beneath his feet was soft, damp, and spongy, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. "Anna?" Marcus called, his voice trembling. But there was no answer. He took a tentative step forward, the underbrush crunching beneath his feet. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of the woman, the thing, that had once been Anna. And then he saw it. A figure standing among the twisted trees. It was too far away to make out clearly, but Marcus knew without a doubt that it was her. But something was wrong. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. It simply stood there waiting. And Marcus couldn't stop himself. He had to go to her. The pull was too strong. It was like a magnetic force, drawing him in. He pushed through the thick undergrowth, his legs feeling heavy, each step harder than the last. The trees seemed to close in around him, their branches reaching out as though trying to trap him, to hold him in this nightmare. And then he reached her. Or at least, what he thought was her. The figure turned slowly, revealing its face. It wasn't Anna. The creature that stood before him was something else entirely. Its face was a distorted, melting mask of human features, flesh sagging and dripping. The eyes too large, the mouth stretched into an eternal scream. The skin was slick, wet, almost translucent. revealing something dark and unnatural moving beneath the surface. Marcus recoiled, his stomach churning with disgust and terror. The thing in front of him wasn't Anna. It wasn't human. It was something far older, far more terrifying. "You shouldn't have followed me," it rasped, its voice a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate inside Marcus's skull. He turned to run, but the ground beneath him shifted, and he stumbled, falling to his knees. The creature was right behind him, its clawed hands reaching for him. With every inch he crawled away, the forest seemed to stretch on forever. The creature's laughter echoed in his ears, rising louder and louder, until it consumed everything. "You can't escape, Marcus." The voice was everywhere now, surrounding him, sinking into his bones. Marcus couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. The world was closing in, and all he could hear was that maddening, twisted laughter. And then, just as he thought he might lose himself completely, a voice, clear, sharp, cut through the chaos. "Wake up, Marcus." Marcus's eyes snapped open. For a moment, everything was dark. The suffocating, overwhelming darkness that had surrounded him in the forest was gone. He could feel the coolness of the air on his skin, and the weight on his chest seemed to lift slightly. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his pulse pounded in his ears. "Where am I?" He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision. It was too much. He had no idea what was real anymore. Was he still in the forest? Was he trapped in that nightmare? Or was this another trick, another illusion, designed to keep him off balance? The silence around him was deafening. He slowly sat up, his body heavy, like he hadn't moved in days. The air around him smelled stale, musty. It took him a moment to realize that he was lying on a cold, stone floor. The faint glow of dim light flickered from somewhere above him, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The walls were smooth, too smooth, unnatural. His fingertips grazed the stone, feeling its cold surface. "I'm in a cell." Marcus's heart rate spiked. The walls felt oppressive, closing in around him as his panic began to rise again. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. He had to escape. He had to. A low, almost imperceptible voice broke through his thoughts. "Marcus." He froze, his body stiffening. It wasn't the voice of the creature. It wasn't Anna either. The voice was soft, familiar but distorted, as though coming from a great distance. And yet, it felt close, too close. "Marcus, you can't hide from what you are." He shook his head, his heart pounding harder with each passing second. It was all too much. The mirrors, the dark forest, the things he had seen. What was happening to him? "Wake up," the voice continued, its tone sweet but mocking. "You know the truth. You always have." Marcus pressed his hands to his ears, desperate to block out the sound, but it only grew louder. "This place, it was made for you. Made for your weakness, your guilt." The voice whispered, growing more insistent. "We all see it, Marcus. We all know you are running from something you can't escape." He looked around frantically, trying to find the source, but there was nothing. No figure, no face. Just shadows, dark corners, and an oppressive silence. The voice seemed to come from everywhere. No, that's not true. I'm not guilty. I'm not." He trailed off, unsure of what he was even denying anymore. "Are you sure?" The voice cooed, the word dripping with venom. "Because we know what you did." Marcus's pulse quickened, his throat tightening. His thoughts swirled in a chaotic mess. What did I do? What is this? Suddenly, the room seemed to shift. The stone walls were no longer just stone. They began to ripple, like a mirage distorting into something else. The shadows at the edges of the room crept closer, forming shapes, figures. He could see them now. Dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to move with purpose. The voice continued, its tone sweet yet menacing, echoing around him. "You thought you could escape the past, didn't you? That's what everyone thinks." Marcus clutched his head, trying to keep his bearings. He felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just a physical space. This was something else. It was a mental prison, a maze of his own making. And the walls, those shifting, pulsating walls, were feeding on his fear, using it to drive him further into madness. He stammered, struggling to speak, his thoughts muddled. I don't remember what I did. A cold laugh echoed through the air, cruel and heartless. That's the problem, Marcus. You never remember, but we do. We remember everything, every choice, every mistake. The figures in the shadows closed in on him. He could feel their presence, the cold weight of their stare, the palpable sense of something watching him from the darkness. They were growing closer, circling around him like vultures, waiting for him to break. Please, stop. Marcus's voice cracked, his throat raw with fear. But the voice continued, relentless. You can't run from what's inside you. It's always been there, and now it's time for you to face it. Marcus took a step back, his legs unsteady, his heart racing. He wanted to escape. He needed to get out of this place. But the walls were closing in, the figures drawing nearer, their whispers growing louder. Suddenly, the door on the far side of the room creaked open, a sliver of light spilling into the otherwise dark chamber. A figure stepped inside. Marcus. The voice was soft, familiar, and for the briefest moment, it felt like a lifeline. It was Anna's voice. But when Marcus looked up, his heart sank. It wasn't Anna. The figure was a woman, but she was different. Her face was familiar, yet twisted. Her features a grotesque mix of recognition and something else, something sinister. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes locked on Marcus, and the door behind her slammed shut with a finality that sent a jolt of panic through him. Who are you? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes scanning him, her gaze colder than the darkest depths of the forest. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp, like a blade cutting through the silence. I'm someone who knows exactly what you've done, and what you still have yet to do. Marcus recoiled as the woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. The chill in the air intensified, almost as if her very presence was draining the warmth from the room. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat was dry, constricted, as though the room itself was suffocating him. She stopped a few feet in front of him, the faint glow of the dim light casting shadows that seemed to dance across her face. It was unsettling, like something inhuman was lurking just beneath the surface. You don't recognize me, do you? She asked, her voice smooth, yet it held an underlying venom. Marcus took a cautious step back, his mind racing. Who is she? Her face. It seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. His mind was a blur, fragments of memories swirling around him like fog. No, I don't know you, he stammered, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to steady his breath, but found that it was impossible. Who are you? The woman's lips curled into a smile that sent a shiver down his spine. You know me, Marcus. You've always known me. Her words were slow, deliberate, as though she was savoring his confusion. But I think you've forgotten. Or perhaps you've been trying to forget. Marcus's stomach churned, a feeling of dread washing over him. There was something in her words, something in the way she looked at him, that gnawed at the edges of his mind. It was as though the woman was calling forth something buried deep inside of him, something he didn't want to face. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. I don't remember, he whispered, as if repeating it enough would make it true. No one ever remembers everything, Marcus, she said, her voice taking on a more dangerous edge. But we all have to face the truth eventually. You're no different. Marcus flinched at her words. His hands trembled as he gripped his arms, trying to hold himself together. What truth? What are you talking about? He demanded, his voice growing more desperate. He was starting to feel like he was drowning, like the walls were closing in on him from all sides. The woman's smile faltered, and for a split second, something darker flashed in her eyes. You really don't remember, do you? She mused aloud, as though pondering a riddle. How amusing. But don't worry, Marcus, I'll remind you. Suddenly, the dim light flickered, and the shadows around them seemed to stretch, reaching toward Marcus. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, the air thick with an oppressive weight. His breath fogged in front of him, and the walls seemed to pulsate as though they were alive. The silence grew louder, more suffocating. The woman's figure began to distort, her edges blurring as she stepped closer, her voice ringing in his ears like a haunting melody. You've seen them, haven't you? She asked, her voice dripping with malice. The eyes in the trees, the whispers in the night, the feeling that someone is always watching you. It's because of me, Marcus. It's because of what you've done. Marcus felt a sharp pang of recognition. The eyes, the whispers, the forest. He had always felt it. The sensation of being followed, of something lurking just beyond his vision. But it wasn't until now, standing face to face with this woman, that he truly understood the connection. She was the source of the fear, the terror that had haunted him since he had first stepped into the woods. You're lying? He breathed, shaking his head in denial.
I didn't do anything.
I didn't. You didn't mean to. She interrupted, her tone almost tender, as if she were speaking to a child. But you did, and now we're all paying for it. The woman's form shifted again, and for a brief moment, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Behind her, in the flickering shadows, were shapes, figures indistinct but unmistakably there. Eyes, hundreds of eyes, all staring at him, watching him, waiting. He staggered back, his heart racing. His breath came in ragged gasps, his chest tight. What do you want from me? His voice was barely more than a whisper, his body trembling with fear. The woman's smile returned, but it was colder now, more predatory. I want you to understand, she said. I want you to remember what you've done, because only then will you truly see what's at stake. Marcus's head spun. The shadows were closing in on him, the eyes narrowing, the whispers growing louder. He reached out, but there was nothing. Nothing solid, nothing tangible. Just the oppressive darkness, the weight of guilt, of something he had yet to remember, pressing down on him. He sank to his knees, clutching his head in his hands. The voices, the eyes, the whispers. It was all too much. And then, in the midst of it all, he heard her voice again, calm and soothing, almost like a lullaby. You're not alone, Marcus. We've been waiting for you. The world around Marcus seemed to dissolve. The cold, the shadows, the whispering voices, all of it became distant as he fell deeper into the haze of his own mind. But through the fog, he could still hear her voice calling out to him, soft yet unyielding, pulling him toward something he wasn't ready to face. Remember, she urged again, her voice like a thread weaving through his consciousness. Remember what you've done, Marcus. He shut his eyes tightly, desperate to block her out, to silence the memories that were creeping forward, clawing at the edges of his mind. But they wouldn't go away. They never did. I don't remember, he whispered, his voice shaking, his mind a whirlwind of confusion. I don't remember any of it. The woman's form shifted again, her face now more defined, more familiar. It was as though she was morphing into someone from his past. Someone he should have known but had long forgotten. The chill in the air grew colder still, the oppressive weight pressing down on him like an iron shackle. You don't remember, but I do, she said, stepping closer. Her eyes bore into him, and for the first time, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This was something deeper, something darker. She reached out, her hand almost touching his face, her fingers cold as ice. "You were never supposed to come back here, Marcus. But you did." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Back here. His heart skipped a beat as fragments of memories rushed forward like a tidal wave. The forest, the pines, the fire. He could see the fire now, its flames licking the sky, the smoke filling his lungs, the screams. But what was it? What had happened? "What are you talking about?" His voice cracked, his throat tight. He wanted to remember, but every time he tried, the memory slipped just out of his grasp, like water running through his fingers. The woman's smile faded, and in its place was something far more chilling, cold fury. "You think you're the only one who has suffered because of your mistakes." The shadows around them seemed to grow thicker, swirling as if alive, closing in on Marcus. He looked around frantically, but the room had changed. The walls were no longer solid, and the floor beneath him had transformed into something soft and uneven, as if he were standing on the forest floor itself. The trees, he could see them now, tall, ancient. Their gnarled roots tangled beneath the earth. The weight of the forest pressed down on him, suffocating him. And then he saw it. In the distance, through the thick mist, there was a clearing, the fire. He could hear the crackling of the flames, the cries of agony. But they weren't just memories. They were real, and they were happening again. "No," he muttered, backing away. "This isn't real. It can't be real." But the woman's eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. She didn't need to say anything more. Marcus felt himself being pulled toward the clearing, his feet moving of their own accord, as though the forest itself was guiding him, or perhaps dragging him toward his fate. "You've already paid the price," she whispered from behind him, her voice like a blade in his ear. "But the reckoning is far from over." The closer he got to the clearing, the clearer the scene became. He saw himself, his younger self, standing at the edge of the fire, a look of horror on his face. But this time, he wasn't alone. There were others with him, figures that he couldn't make out, their faces obscured by the smoke and flames. But he knew them. He had to. They were his past, his guilt, his burden. "You did this?" The woman's voice came again, harsh and accusing. "You set the fire. You brought it all upon us." Marcus's heart raced as he stumbled forward, his hands reaching out for anything, for some way to stop the nightmare from becoming real. The fire roared louder now, the heat singeing his skin. He could hear the screams of the others, but the panic, the pain. But through it all, he knew one thing. He was the cause of it all. He had been the one to make the choice. "No," he shouted. But the word was lost in the deafening roar of the flames. He tried to turn away, but it was as if the fire had hold of him, dragging him into its depths. His body screamed for escape, but his legs wouldn't move. He was trapped. "You can't run from the truth," the woman said, her voice the only thing that cut through the chaos. "Not anymore." Marcus's chest tightened as he fell to his knees, the overwhelming weight of guilt suffocating him. His tears mixed with the smoke, and for the first time, he understood the true meaning of the woman's words. He wasn't just facing his past. He was reliving it. The fire blazed brighter, the faces of the figures in the smoke becoming clearer. He saw them now. His friends, his family, people he had known, their eyes wide with terror as the flames consumed them. They reached for him, but he couldn't move. He couldn't save them. "I didn't mean it," Marcus gasped, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But the woman's cold laughter echoed through the clearing. "You meant it when you lit the match. You meant it when you walked away." A Marcus screamed, his voice raw, but the sound was swallowed by the inferno. He fell forward, his face pressed against the dirt, the heat scorching his skin. But even through the pain, one thought burned brighter than all the others. It's too late now. The shadows closed in around him once more, the fire fading into nothingness. The clearing disappeared, leaving only the woman standing before him, her cold eyes watching him with something that almost resembled pity. "The past is never truly gone," she whispered. "It waits for you. Always." With that, she vanished into the darkness, leaving Marcus alone once more, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a 1,000-pound stone. Marcus sat alone in the darkness, the air around him cold and thick, as though it were suffocating the very life from his body. The remnants of the fire still lingered in his mind, but it was the woman's words that echoed louder, reverberating in his skull. "The past is never truly gone. It waits for you. Always." His hands trembled as he ran them through his hair, his mind spinning in a desperate frenzy. What did she mean? What was he supposed to do? His past, the thing he had tried to bury, to forget, was clawing its way back, resurfacing like some vengeful specter. He had thought it was behind him, that the quiet life he had built for himself in the years since the fire would be his redemption. But he had been wrong. No matter how far he ran, the past always caught up with him. "It's not real," he muttered to himself, though the words felt hollow in his throat. The shadows in the room seemed to close in on him, and the stillness of the night was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside the window. He had to escape. He had to find a way out before whatever this was, this nightmare, consumed him whole. The floor creaked beneath him as he stood, his legs unsteady, as though they had forgotten how to hold his weight. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something. Anything that would make sense of the madness. His mind was a maze of fragmented memories, each one more horrifying than the last. The woman's face, her cold, accusing stare, flashed before him again. Her voice, soft but unyielding, continued to haunt him. "You set the fire. You brought it all upon us." "No," he whispered again, his chest tightening. He shook his head, trying to dispel the image. But it only grew stronger, clearer. He stumbled toward the door, his breath shallow, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step felt like a journey through quicksand, a dragging him deeper into a place he couldn't escape. But he had to keep moving. There was no turning back now. The door opened with a creak, and Marcus stepped into the hallway, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The house was eerily silent, every room empty, as if it too were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He couldn't stay here. The house, the forest, the memories, they were all intertwined, and they were all leading him towards something he wasn't ready to face. His footsteps echoed down the hall as he made his way to the front door. He paused for a moment, his hand hovering over the knob. A strange sensation crawled up his spine, like something was watching him from the darkness beyond. He hesitated, unsure of what he would find if he stepped outside. Then he heard it, a faint sound, like the rustling of leaves, or perhaps the whisper of a voice. It was coming from the forest. A chill ran down his back. "I'm not going back there," he muttered to himself, but the words felt empty. His feet moved before he could stop them, carrying him toward the door, toward the unknown. The moment he stepped outside, the night air hit him like a wall. The forest loomed before him, the trees stretching high into the sky, their branches swaying in the wind. He could hear the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, but there was something else, something wrong, in the air. The smell of smoke was faint but present, mingling with the earthy scent of pine. His heart skipped a beat. Marcus took a step forward, then another, his breath coming faster. He could feel it now. The pull. The forest had a way of drawing you in, and he was helpless against it. The ground beneath his feet felt familiar, but not in a comforting way. It was as though he had been here before, as though the trees themselves were watching him, waiting for him to remember. He walked deeper into the woods, each step carrying him farther from the safety of his house, farther from the life he had tried to build. The whispering voices seemed louder now, like the forest was speaking to him. They're urging him forward, but he didn't want to listen. He didn't want to go any further, but his feet betrayed him. He couldn't stop now. The path was opening up before him. Like some invisible force was guiding him, pulling him deeper into the heart of the forest. And then he saw it. The clearing was just ahead, bathed in a dim, unnatural light. The fire. He could see it clearly now, its flames licking the air, crackling as if alive. But something was wrong. The fire wasn't the same. It was darker, more sinister. Its flames black instead of red. The smoke curled into the air in unnatural shapes, twisting and writhing like it was alive. Marcus froze in place, his breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary fire. The figure appeared before him, stepping out of the smoke, her form like a shadow that merged with the darkness around her. The woman. She stood there, her eyes glowing with a cold, otherworldly light, her face filled with the same unrelenting fury he had seen before. "You've come back," she said, her voice chilling, though there was something almost pleased in it. "You've returned to face your judgment." His heart raced, the weight of her words sinking into him like a lead weight. The clearing seemed to close in on him, the trees leaning in as if they were part of the ritual. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and something else, a sickly sweet odor that made his stomach churn. "I never wanted this," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I never wanted any of this." The woman's smile was slow, deliberate, as she took a step closer to him, her eyes never leaving his. "You didn't have to want it, Marcus. You only had to let it happen." She raised her hand, and the fire responded, its black flames twisting and lashing out like the jaws of some great beast. Marcus felt his body freeze, paralyzed by the sight of it, the overwhelming sense of dread washing over him. "You can't escape," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. "You can never escape." And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the fire died down, leaving only the woman standing before him in the now, still air. But something was different now. Something had changed. Her smile had faded, replaced by a look of grim satisfaction. "The reckoning is upon you, Marcus." It always was. The ground beneath him trembled, and Marcus could feel the weight of his past pressing down on him, crushing him. The air seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't understand, and he realized, too late, that there was nowhere left to run. The woman's voice echoed in his ears one last time. "It's time to face the consequences of your actions." The ground beneath Marcus's feet seemed to crack open, as though the earth itself was rebelling against him. The air had turned cold, biting at his skin as though it were trying to tear him apart. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, his body locked in place by the sheer weight of the woman's words. The clearing around him blurred, the trees bending in unnatural shapes, their shadows stretching long like claws reaching for him. The woman stood before him, silent but still, her glowing eyes piercing through the haze of fear and confusion. The fire, what remained of it, smoldered at her feet, a blackened pit that seemed to breathe with an unnatural rhythm. He had thought it was just a nightmare, some lingering memory that had caught up with him, but this was no dream. The past, the fire, the faces of those who had died, it was all real. Every inch of it. "You were the one who called it?" the woman said softly, her voice reverberating in his chest like a distant drumbeat. "You lit the match. You gave it life." "No." Marcus shook his head violently, the words catching in his throat. "I didn't. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But she only smiled, her lips curling into a grim, knowing grin. "Intentions don't matter. It's what you allowed to happen that makes all the difference." His eyes flicked to the ground, to the remnants of the fire, where the blackened earth still smoldered in the wake of the inferno. He could almost hear the screams, the desperate cries of those trapped in the blaze. The guilt gnawed at him like a festering wound. He had thought the fire was just an accident, something that couldn't be avoided. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had known all along. He had walked away, leaving it to burn, leaving them to die. You think you can escape it? Her voice rose now, sharp and accusing, like a blade cutting through the fog of his shame. You can't outrun the fire, not the one in your heart, and certainly not the one that consumes everything you touch.
Stop!
Marcus screamed, his voice cracking as the weight of her words crushed him from all sides. He dropped to his knees, the earth beneath him feeling as if it were swallowing him whole. I didn't mean to.
Please, I didn't want anyone to die.
The woman's face softened, but only for a moment. She stepped closer to him, her eyes never leaving his. It doesn't matter what you wanted. The fire doesn't care. Marcus could feel the tears sting his eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to wipe them away. He was trapped in this nightmare, shackled by his own failure, and there was no escape. He had tried to move on, to bury the past, but it was always there, always lurking just beneath the surface. Suddenly, the woman extended her hand to him, her fingers long and pale, a gesture that should have been comforting, but instead felt like a summons. He looked up at her, the cold air biting at his cheeks. His breath came in shallow gasps. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What I want," she replied softly, "is for you to understand, to know the truth. That fire, Marcus, it never left you. It's inside you, always." Her words struck him like a blow, and for a moment he felt as if the ground had fallen away entirely. His heart pounded in his chest, a deafening beat that drowned out everything else. The fire, his past, the lives he had taken. It was all inside him, festering, waiting. "No," he shouted, though his voice was weak, shaky. I can't carry this anymore. Please, make it stop." But the woman only looked down at him with pity. "You think this is the end. You think you can simply ask for it all to go away. You're wrong. It's just the beginning, Marcus." With that, she stepped backward, disappearing into the smoke as if she were never there at all. And suddenly, the world around him shifted. The darkness seemed to close in on him, the trees bending in on themselves as though the forest were swallowing him whole. The air became thick with the sound of crackling flames, and the scent of smoke was overpowering, choking him. He could feel it now, deep in his bones. The fire, the heat, the weight of everything he had done. He stumbled to his feet, his legs shaking beneath him as he looked around in panic. The forest was alive with the sound of burning, of cracking wood and rustling leaves. The ground beneath him trembled, and he realized, with a sinking feeling, that it wasn't the earth that was shaking. It was him. Marcus turned, but the trees around him were no longer just trees. They were twisted, gnarled forms, their bark blackened with smoke, their branches stretching out like hands, reaching for him. And in the distance, just beyond the horizon of the trees, he saw it. The fire. It was coming for him. "No!" he cried out, his voice raw with fear. I didn't mean to stop, but there was no one to hear him, no one to stop it. The flames surged forward, faster now, devouring everything in their path, and Marcus could only stand there, frozen, as the heat rushed toward him. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the fire stopped. The forest was still again, the flames reduced to nothing more than a faint, distant glow on the horizon. But the damage had already been done. The trees were burned, the earth scorched. And Marcus stood in the midst of it all, panting, his heart racing. The woman's voice echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the truth he could no longer deny. You can't escape it. Marcus collapsed to his knees, his hands pressed against the charred earth, feeling the searing heat beneath his fingertips. The pain was unbearable. But it was nothing compared to the pain inside him. He had made his choice. He had walked away. And now he was being forced to face it. Marcus's breath came in ragged bursts as he stared at the barren landscape around him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint crackling of distant embers that still clung to life. But something was wrong, deeply wrong. The world felt as if it had been twisted, reshaped into something unrecognizable, and all he could hear was the deafening beat of his own heart. The flames were gone, but their presence lingered in the air, suffocating him with every breath. The trees around him were nothing more than husks, their once vibrant leaves reduced to ash. The ground was scorched, cracked and broken, as though the very earth itself had been torn apart. And yet, despite the devastation, Marcus knew something darker was at play. He stood up, his knees trembling, unsure if his body would betray him again. The memories of what had happened surged forward, images of the fire, the screams, the faces of the lost, and he was drowning in them. His mind screamed for relief, for escape, but there was nowhere to go. He stumbled through the blackened forest, each step like walking through the remains of his own soul. Every breath he took felt like a betrayal of the lives he had taken, of the innocent faces that had been burned away by his own actions. And then he heard it, a faint whisper, like the wind brushing through the ashes. At first, he thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him, but then it grew louder, more distinct. The voice was unmistakable. Marcus. He stopped dead in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. The voice was soft but cold, chilling him to the bone. His body went rigid, a deep sense of dread sinking into his chest. He looked around frantically, his eyes scanning the surrounding trees, but there was no one. Nothing but the remnants of the forest. Marcus. It came again, closer this time, as if it were right behind him. He spun around, his eyes wide with panic, but still there was no one there. The world around him was still and silent, save for the ominous whisper that continued to echo through his mind. Who? Who is it? He whispered, his voice hoarse and trembling. The voice didn't respond, but instead there was a sound. A low, guttural growl that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as the ground beneath him began to tremble. The trees shifted, their twisted forms groaning, as though the very forest itself was alive. And then it appeared. From the depths of the earth, a shadow emerged, stretching out like a dark stain, moving with an unnatural speed. It slithered across the ground, devouring everything in its path, the very air seeming to warp and twist as it moved closer. Marcus's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, his hands gripping the scorched earth for support. He couldn't look away from the shadow as it grew, expanding like a living nightmare. The air around him turned cold, and the whisper grew louder. You can't escape it. You never could. The shadow reached out, its tendrils writhing as it consumed the very light around it. Marcus's pulse raced as it loomed over him, its form now towering, an overwhelming presence that threatened to swallow him whole.
No, please.
Marcus gasped, his voice breaking as he tried to scramble backward, his fingers scraping against the charred ground. But the shadow was already upon him. It engulfed him in an instant, the darkness seeping into every pore of his body, dragging him deeper and deeper into its cold embrace. He could feel the weight of it, the suffocating pressure of it closing in on him, crushing him with its raw, primal power. His mind screamed for release, for escape, but the shadow only grinned, its form flickering and distorting like smoke in the wind. You can't escape, it whispered again, its voice low and menacing. You are the fire. You are the one who started it all. Marcus's eyes widened in horror as the words hit him like a physical blow. He tried to fight back, but it was no use. The shadow was inside him now, its cold fingers wrapping around his soul, dragging him into the abyss. And just as he thought he would be consumed by it completely, the world shifted. The darkness pulled back, unraveling like a thread. The shadow seemed to retreat, its grip on him loosening. The pain, the suffocating weight, all faded away. The coldness disappeared, replaced by warmth, a warmth he hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. He blinked, his vision blurry, his mind spinning. He found himself standing once more. But this time, he was no longer in the blackened forest. He was back at the cabin. The sight of it struck him like a thunderbolt, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. The familiar, weathered walls stood before him, untouched by the fire, as if it had all been a dream. The clearing around him was calm, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. But it was wrong. The air was too still, the trees too silent. The birds that should have been singing were gone, replaced by an eerie, unnatural quiet. The ground beneath his feet felt wrong, as if it was no longer solid, no longer real. The world around him was a distorted reflection of the reality he had just left, and he knew, deep in his gut, that this wasn't where he was meant to be. Marcus. The voice echoed again, soft and familiar, but this time it came from within the cabin. He turned, his heart pounding in his chest. The door was slightly ajar, as if beckoning him to enter. Come inside. He couldn't stop himself. His feet moved before he could think, carrying him toward the door. He reached out and pushed it open. The inside of the cabin was dark, the air thick with the scent of stale wood and something else. Something metallic. Like blood. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he stepped inside, his eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light. There, in the center of the room, stood the woman. Her eyes were cold, her skin pale as death. She smiled, and the sight of it chilled him to the core. "Welcome back," she said, her voice smooth, hypnotic. Marcus tried to speak, but no words came. The shadow from before loomed in his mind, a dark presence that clawed at him, but it was still, waiting, watching. "I told you," the woman said, her voice growing louder, echoing through the cabin. "You can't escape what you've done. The fire is inside you. Always has been." Marcus backed away, his heart racing as the walls of the cabin seemed to close in on him. He could feel it now, the heat, the smoke, the screams of those he had failed. But there was no escape. Marcus's heart pounded, his breath shallow as the cabin walls seemed to close in around him. The woman, her cold eyes fixed on him, stepped forward, her every movement slow and deliberate. Her smile twisted, no longer the welcoming gesture it once appeared to be, but something far darker. He couldn't speak. His tongue felt heavy in his mouth. His thoughts muddled as if they were being swallowed by the overwhelming presence in the room. The cabin, once a place of solace, now felt like a tomb, each creak of the floorboards amplifying the deafening silence that clung to the air. "You've come back," the woman said, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to vibrate through his bones. "But you haven't learned, have you?" Her eyes bore into him, and he could feel the weight of her gaze, like something inside him was being unraveled. He wanted to run, to escape this place, but his legs felt like lead. His body refused to move. "No, no. I didn't come back." Marcus managed to choke out, his voice hoarse, almost foreign to him. "This isn't real. This isn't happening." The woman laughed, a sound that was both melodic and chilling. It echoed around the room, bouncing off the walls like a sinister lullaby. "Not real?" she repeated, her voice dripping with amusement. "Marcus, everything is real. Every action, every decision, every lie. They have weight. And you have felt it, haven't you? You've felt the weight of your choices." Her smile faded, replaced by a cold, empty expression that sent a shiver down his spine. Marcus's mind raced, his memories flashing before his eyes in rapid succession. The fire, the destruction, the faces of those he couldn't save, the shadow, the whispers. It all came crashing back, overwhelming him. "You don't know who I am, do you?" the woman asked, her voice now laced with a dangerous edge. You've forgotten what you've done. You've buried it deep inside, hoping it would vanish. But it never does, Marcus. It never will. He struggled to breathe, his chest tightening with the weight of her words. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't. She raised a hand, and the room seemed to grow colder, the air heavy with an unspoken tension. No, she interrupted, her voice a low growl. You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now, you must face the consequences. You must face me, suddenly. The temperature in the room dropped, and Marcus could see his breath fogging in the air. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, as though they were alive, creeping toward him with an unnatural hunger. The woman stepped closer, her movements predatory, her eyes never leaving his. He could feel her presence growing stronger, pushing him toward the edge of madness. The walls seemed to close in further, the cabin stretching and warping, its once familiar shape becoming an endless void. You can't hide from this. Marcus, she whispered, her voice like a snake's hiss. The fire is inside you. You are its keeper, its prisoner. The shadows seemed to grow, encircling him, suffocating him in their darkness. Marcus felt his knees buckle, and he sank to the floor, gasping for air. The weight of her words crushed him, her presence pressing down on him like a physical force. No, he gasped, his voice trembling. I don't deserve this. I didn't mean to cause all of this. The woman crouched down before him, her face inches from his, her eyes glinting with a cruel, knowing gleam. You never do, she whispered. But it doesn't matter. Intentions mean nothing when the fire has already spread, and you, Marcus, are the spark that started it all. Marcus's mind reeled. His memories, his actions, everything he had done, everything he hadn't done. All of it swirled together in a chaotic blur. The faces of those he had failed, the lives that had been lost, haunted him. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. I'm sorry. The woman smiled, her expression a mix of pity and disdain. She stood up, turning her back to him as she walked toward the center of the cabin. The shadows seemed to retreat, but only for a moment. The suffocating atmosphere remained, thick with the weight of the unspoken. Sorry won't save you, she said coldly, her back still turned. And neither will running. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached up to clutch his head, trying to shut out the images that plagued him. He couldn't escape them. The fire, the screams, the guilt, it all bled together into a suffocating fog that he couldn't shake. Please, he whispered, his voice breaking. What do you want from me? What is this? Why am I here? She turned slowly, her face cold and unreadable. I want you to face the truth, Marcus. I want you to understand that there is no redemption, no forgiveness. There is only the weight of what you've done. Her words cut through him like a knife, each syllable a wound. He was drowning in them, struggling to breathe, struggling to think. The walls seemed to close in even more, the room warping as if reality itself was bending under the pressure. No. Marcus gasped, his chest heaving with panic. I can't do this anymore. Then you can leave, she said, her voice colder than ever. But know this. Every step you take, every place you go, you'll carry the fire with you. And it will never let you go. Marcus staggered to his feet, his hands shaking. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know how to escape. But as he turned to leave the cabin, a sudden sound, something soft but unmistakable, caught his attention. It was a whisper. Marcus. He froze, his blood running cold. The voice was familiar, but it wasn't hers. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years, a voice that cut through the fog in his mind like a blade. He turned back toward the woman, his eyes wide with fear. No, it can't be. But before he could finish, the world shattered. The floor beneath him cracked open, the walls of the cabin splintering as though they were made of paper. The air was filled with the sound of screaming, agonizing, endless screaming, each cry seeming to come from every direction at once. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't scream. The pain was unbearable, 1,000 hands pulling him in every direction. And then, in the middle of it all, he heard the voice again. Marcus. It was close now. So close. But before he could react, everything went dark. When Marcus opened his eyes again, the world was not what it had been. There was no cabin, no walls, no shadows, no woman. The air was still, and the ground beneath him was soft, like earth, yet it felt wrong, alien. He was lying in a forest, the trees towering above him. Their branches twisted and gnarled as though they had never known light. His heart raced as he pushed himself up, but the movement felt sluggish, unnatural. His limbs were heavy, his body stiff, as if he had been lying still for much longer than he realized. He stumbled to his feet, the forest stretching endlessly in all directions. The silence was oppressive, not the gentle kind of quiet that came with nature, but a deep, suffocating stillness that felt like it had been in place for centuries. "Where am I?" he whispered to the empty air, his voice sounding small, almost insignificant. The forest responded with nothing. No wind, no birds, no rustling leaves. Just silence. He tried to take a step forward, but the ground seemed to shift beneath him. The earth trembled slightly, as though something beneath the surface was alive, breathing, waiting. Marcus froze, his breath catching in his throat. The eerie feeling of being watched washed over him again, and he instinctively turned, expecting to see the woman or the shadows, but there was nothing. Only the dense, twisted trees and the unnerving stillness. The silence was broken suddenly by a faint sound, distant, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. A whisper. "Marcus." It was the same voice. The voice that had haunted him in the cabin, the voice that had called out to him in the darkness. His blood ran cold. The forest seemed to pulse with the sound, the whisper reverberating in his mind, echoing through the trees, but when he turned to look, there was no source. It was everywhere. "Marcus, you can't escape." The whisper grew louder, closer. His pulse quickened and his legs began to tremble. He stumbled backward, desperate for some kind of refuge, but there was nowhere to go. The trees closed in around him, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The voice was all around him now, its words relentless. "It's too late, Marcus." The ground beneath his feet shifted once more, and with a jolt, Marcus found himself falling, his body plummeting downward into a chasm of blackness. The air grew colder, and the whisper was replaced by a chorus of voices, each one faint and indistinct, but filled with an unmistakable sense of anguish. "No, no, I..." He reached out in panic, trying to grab hold of anything, but there was nothing to grasp. The darkness consumed him, swallowing him whole. The next moment, Marcus was lying on the ground again. His body ached, his mind spinning. He opened his eyes, expecting to see the same twisted forest, but instead, he was back in the cabin. His heart pounded in his chest, and he sat up with a jolt, gasping for air, as though he had just surfaced from drowning. The woman was standing in front of him, her cold eyes fixed on his. She didn't move, didn't speak, but the weight of her gaze was unbearable. The cabin felt different now, darker, as if the walls themselves had absorbed something malevolent. "I told you it wasn't over," she said softly, her voice a low, haunting whisper. Marcus's mind reeled. He couldn't tell what was real anymore. Was it the forest? Was it the cabin? Was this another nightmare, or had he truly been transported somewhere else? Everywhere he looked, he felt a sense of wrongness, like the very fabric of reality had been torn and was now fraying at the edges. "I don't understand," he whispered, his voice shaky. "What do you want from me?" The woman tilted her head, her smile thin and cruel. "What do you think I want?" I want you to remember, Marcus. I want you to see what you've done, to understand what you've become. Marcus's throat tightened. The woman's words cut through him like shards of glass. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to escape, but he was trapped. There was no way out. You'll never escape the fire, she whispered, her voice thick with contempt. It will always be with you, waiting, and when the time comes, it will consume you entirely. Marcus shuddered, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. The fire. He hadn't thought about it in years, but now the memory came rushing back. The flames, the smoke, the lives it had taken, and the truth, the horrible truth, that he had been the one to start it all. He had been the one to ignite the spark that set everything into motion. No, he whispered, his voice barely audible. No, I didn't mean it. I didn't want this. The woman's smile widened, her eyes narrowing. It doesn't matter what you wanted. It only matters what you've done. And the consequences are coming. Marcus looked around the cabin again, his gaze frantic. The shadows seemed to grow longer, stretching across the walls like monstrous tendrils. The fire, the shadow, the voices, they were all coming back. The walls seemed to pulse with their presence, as though they were alive, feeding on his fear. You can't hide from it, the woman said, her voice growing colder. You can't run. The fire is already inside you. It will never leave. Marcus staggered to his feet, his mind spiraling into chaos. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He had to get out of here. He had to escape. Please. His voice cracked, desperation pouring into his words. Please, I don't know what you want from me. I'm sorry. Please. The woman's expression softened for a brief moment, as though she were considering his plea, but then her smile returned, colder than before. You're sorry now, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. But it's too late. You've made your choices, and now you must face them. Marcus's vision blurred, and the cabin around him seemed to stretch and warp, its walls bending in ways that defied reality. The shadows closed in, the air thick with the scent of smoke and something darker, something ancient. The fire was coming, and then, as the world collapsed around him, Marcus heard the whisper again. The fire is coming for you. Everything went black. When Marcus opened his eyes, the air was different. It was thick, heavy, laden with the smell of smoke and charred wood. He felt as though he had been asleep for an eternity, his body aching as though had been stretched beyond its limits. His chest heaved with every shallow breath, the air burning in his lungs. He was no longer in the cabin, no longer in the forest. He was standing in the middle of a vast, desolate wasteland, the ground beneath him cracked and scorched. A wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the sound of distant cries, mournful, agonized cries that seemed to echo from all directions. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart hammering in his chest. The land stretched out endlessly before him, an endless expanse of blackened earth and jagged rocks. There was no sign of life here, no trees, no shelter, no escape, just emptiness, a void that seemed to swallow everything it touched. And in the distance, through the haze of smoke and dust, he saw it, a massive, dark shape looming on the horizon. It was hard to make out, but the form was unmistakable. A tower of fire, its flames licking the sky like the fingers of some ancient beast. The fire, he whispered, his voice trembling. The wind seemed to pick up, howling louder, and for a moment, he thought he heard something else. A voice, low and rasping, as if it were calling his name. His pulse quickened. Marcus. He turned, frantic, searching for the source of the voice. But there was nothing, no one. Only the swirling winds and the endless black wasteland. The flames in the distance flickered like an ominous beacon, drawing him in, pulling him toward it. No, he muttered, his legs shaking as he took a step backward. I won't go near it. I can't. But the ground seemed to shift beneath him, the air growing even thicker, suffocating. The whispers, those same haunting whispers, filled his ears once again. They were everywhere, echoing in his mind, in his bones. "You can't outrun it, Marcus." He spun around, but there was no one behind him, just the endless wasteland, the suffocating silence, and the distant fire. "The fire is already inside you." Marcus's breath hitched. He could feel it now. The weight of the fire pressing against his chest, burning from the inside out. It was as if the flames had followed him, had found their way into his very soul. The guilt, the terror, the memories, all of it was consuming him. It was always meant to end this way. The voice whispered, cold and indifferent. "This is your fate. This is your punishment." "No." Marcus gasped, clutching at his chest. "I didn't mean it. I didn't want to." The fire grew louder in his ears, the crackling and roaring filling the air around him. His vision blurred as the heat intensified, and the ground beneath his feet trembled. The smoke thickened, choking him, suffocating him. He could feel the flames closing in, reaching for him, their fiery fingers dancing just beyond the edge of his vision. "You wanted to burn it all down," the voice continued, mocking. "And now, you will burn with it." His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground, his body racked with pain. He could feel the heat radiating from the flames in the distance. Could feel the fire's presence, even though it had not yet reached him. He could see it, creeping closer and closer, its monstrous tendrils stretching toward him. "No, no." Marcus whimpered, but his voice was lost in the howling wind. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to happen." But there was no one to hear his pleas, no one to answer his cries. Just the endless fire, the never-ending whispers, and the feeling of something ancient and malevolent watching, waiting for him to burn. The ground beneath him began to shake violently, and suddenly, the air was filled with an explosion of heat. Marcus screamed, his skin burning, his breath choking in his throat as the flames surged around him. He tried to crawl, to run, but the fire was everywhere. It consumed him, wrapped around him like 1,000 hands, pulling him deeper into the abyss. But just as quickly as it had come, the fire vanished. The heat faded, the smoke dissipated, and Marcus found himself lying on the ground again, gasping for air. The wasteland was gone, replaced by the dark, twisted forest he had seen before. The cabin was back, standing ominously in the distance, shrouded in shadow. He had been here before. He had seen this place, but now it was different. Now, the air was thick with a sense of dread, an overwhelming weight pressing down on him. The forest seemed darker, its trees reaching out like hands, grasping at the air. The cabin stood silent, its windows dark and empty. "No," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. "This can't be happening. Not again." But the whispers were back, swirling around him like a storm. He could hear them, feel them, inside his mind. The woman's voice, the voice that had haunted him from the beginning, filled the air once again. "It's not over yet, Marcus. The fire is inside you. And now, it's coming for you." Marcus's heart raced as he turned, desperately searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to go. The shadows were closing in, the darkness swallowing the world around him. He had nowhere to run. Marcus's mind raced as the shadows seemed to draw closer. His heart pounded in his chest, and every breath felt like a struggle. The forest around him, twisted, dark, suffocating, pressed in on him from every side. The trees groaned, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, seeking to entangle him. "It's too late, Marcus." The voice whispered again, a cold, malicious whisper that slithered through his mind. "You can't escape it. You can't outrun it. The forest has claimed you."
"No, no."
Marcus gasped, stumbling backward. The ground was uneven beneath his feet, as though the earth itself were shifting, altering. He could hear the distant crackling of fire again, that terrible sound that had haunted him for so long. It was there, lurking in the background, waiting. He turned, desperately looking for an exit. The path was blocked by thick underbrush, the trees growing closer together, their roots twisting and knotting, creating an impenetrable barrier. There was no way forward, no way out. The voice came again, this time louder, more insistent. You can't run, Marcus. The fire is part of you now. The forest is your prison. You are trapped here forever. He fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he pressed them into the cold, damp earth. The whispers were everywhere now, filling his mind, drowning out his thoughts. It's too late. There's nothing you can do to escape. A cold chill ran down Marcus's spine. He couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't let the whispers take over his mind, couldn't let the darkness consume him. But as he stood up, his legs weak and unsteady, the world around him shifted once again. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the distant fire seemed to grow louder, as if it were drawing closer. He had to find a way out. He had to get away from the fire, away from the forest. But the more he tried to run, the more the trees closed in. It was as though the forest itself was alive, watching him, moving to trap him. He stumbled, falling to the ground once again, his breath shallow and ragged. The air felt heavy, suffocating. The fire, the whispers, everything, the weight of it all was pressing down on him. And then, as if from nowhere, he heard it, a voice. Not the malicious whispers, but something else. Something familiar. Marcus. He looked up, his eyes wide. There in the distance, standing just beyond the reach of the trees, was a figure. A woman. Her face was obscured by shadow, but he knew who it was. Eliza, he whispered, the name escaping his lips before he could stop himself. The woman stepped forward, her presence somehow calming, even in this nightmare. She didn't speak at first. She just stood there, watching him, her expression unreadable. Her dark hair fluttered in the wind, her eyes cold yet filled with an emotion that Marcus couldn't quite place. Eliza. Marcus said again, this time louder, his voice shaking. Please, you have to help me. You have to get me out of here. She took a step closer, and as she did, the darkness seemed to recede slightly, the shadows less oppressive. The air felt cooler, less suffocating. For a moment, Marcus thought he could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. I can't help you, Marcus. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, but there was a certain finality to it. This is your path. You brought this upon yourself. Marcus's heart sank, and he scrambled to his feet, desperate.
No, this isn't my fault. You don't understand.
He reached out to her, but the space between them seemed to grow, pulling her further away, just out of reach.
I didn't want this. I didn't ask for this.
But Eliza shook her head, her gaze unwavering. You always thought you could escape, Marcus. But the forest knows you. It knows your guilt, your fear, your regret, and now it's too late. A heavy silence settled over them, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. The air grew thick again, heavier, suffocating. The fire's distant crackle was louder now, and the ground beneath him seemed to shift again, like the earth itself was warping. You've always tried to run from your past. Eliza continued, her voice cold and distant. But now it's here, Marcus. It's always been here. And the fire, it's the only thing left. New. Marcus breathed, his eyes wide with horror. I didn't want this. The ground beneath him suddenly gave way, and Marcus fell forward, his face colliding with the cold, rough earth. He gasped, his hands instinctively reaching out to brace himself, but there was nothing to hold on to. The ground was like sand, slipping away beneath him. The forest above him began to collapse, the trees shaking and bending as if something was tearing them from their roots. The wind howled, and the fire in the distance roared louder, the heat pressing against him, suffocating him. He had no way to escape. You wanted to burn it all down. Eliza's voice whispered again. the words seeming to come from everywhere. And now you'll burn with it. The flames surged forward, creeping toward him like a living thing, consuming everything in their path. Marcus screamed, his body trembling with fear as the fire closed in around him. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the fire disappeared. The ground stopped shaking, and the world fell silent. The air was still, cold, and the forest stood once again, dark and foreboding. Marcus looked around, disoriented, his breath coming in shallow gasps. But there was no sign of Eliza, no sign of the fire. The forest was quiet now, unnervingly so. But something had changed. He could feel it. The air was heavier, more oppressive. And the darkness, it felt different. It felt like it was watching him. He wasn't alone. And then, from deep within the forest, a new sound emerged. A soft, almost melodic hum. A sound that seemed to come from everywhere, reverberating through the trees, filling his ears. It was a song. A familiar song. It was the same song that had haunted him from the very beginning. The song of the forest. The song drifted through the trees like a memory, a sound so ancient it felt woven into the very fabric of the forest. It was beautiful in a haunting way, like the wind singing through the branches, or the whisper of a forgotten dream. Marcus stood frozen, his heart racing, as the melody seemed to seep into his bones. He could feel it, deep in his chest, in the pit of his stomach, as if the forest itself was speaking through the song. He couldn't remember when the song had started, but now it was all encompassing, drowning out everything else. The sound of the fire, the whispers, Eliza's voice. It all faded away, replaced by the eerie melody that seemed to carry with it a warning. He took a step forward, the ground cold beneath his feet. The trees loomed over him, their twisted branches arching in impossible angles, like the skeletal remains of forgotten giants. The song continued to play, a soft hum that reverberated through the air, making the world feel both unreal and painfully present. There was something deeply unsettling about it, something that tugged at his very core. The more he listened, the more it felt like the forest was calling to him, beckoning him deeper into its shadowed depths. But Marcus couldn't help himself. Something inside him, the same part of him that had made him wander into the forest in the first place, urged him forward. The song was a lure, a siren's call that he couldn't resist. He pushed through the underbrush, his mind foggy, his body moving on instinct. The trees around him seemed to shift and twist, their forms blending into one another, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the path ahead. The song, ever present, grew louder, drawing him toward something, or someone. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps it was the other way around. Time seemed irrelevant in this place, and Marcus found himself growing more and more disoriented as he walked deeper into the heart of the forest. He stumbled over roots, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but still, the song pushed him forward. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a force, a presence that seemed to guide him, to push him into the unknown. And then, at the edge of a clearing, he saw her again. Eliza stood at the center of the clearing, bathed in an ethereal light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the song. Her face was unreadable, her eyes dark and distant, and yet Marcus felt drawn to her, as if she were the key to everything, his escape, his salvation, or perhaps his damnation. Eliza. His voice was hoarse, weak. He couldn't stop himself from calling her name, even though a part of him knew it was pointless. She didn't answer. She never did. She turned her head slightly, just enough for Marcus to see the faintest flicker of recognition in her gaze. And yet, she didn't move, didn't speak. The song seemed to swell, growing louder, more urgent, until it felt as if the very air around them vibrated with it.
Eliza!
Marcus called again, taking a hesitant step forward. Please, you have to help me. I don't understand. What's happening? What is this place? But Eliza didn't answer. She just stood there, her figure now more shadow than substance, as if she were slowly fading into the very fabric of the forest. "She cannot help you." The voice spoke again, this time louder than before, louder than the song, louder than everything. It came from everywhere, echoing through the trees, twisting through the very air around him. Marcus's heart raced. He whipped his head around, trying to locate the source of the voice. But there was nothing, no one. "You think you can escape, don't you?" The voice continued, its tone dripping with venom. "You think you can find your way out of this place, but it's too late, Marcus. You are here. You belong here."
No!
Marcus shouted, his voice breaking.
I don't belong here! I didn't want any of this!
"I just want to get out." The voice laughed, a low, hollow sound that sent chills down his spine. "You cannot escape your fate, Marcus. You can't outrun what you are. The forest knows your darkness. It knows your guilt, your regret." The air around him grew thick, suffocating, as if the forest itself was pressing in on him. The trees groaned, the branches creaking and bending as if reaching out to grab him. "This is your prison," the voice hissed. "You will never leave. You will never escape." But Marcus refused to accept it. He couldn't. He wouldn't. He turned back to Eliza, his eyes desperate, his breath shallow. "Please," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "There has to be a way out." Eliza's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Marcus saw something there. It was as if she was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. Her gaze softened, just for a moment, before she slowly shook her head. "It's too late for you," she whispered, the words barely audible over the song that continued to swell around them. "You're already lost." The forest groaned, and the ground beneath Marcus's feet trembled. The air thickened with an unseen weight, and for a moment, he thought he felt the presence of something watching him, waiting. He turned, his body frozen in terror, as the trees around him began to shift, bending and twisting as if coming to life. The path he had taken, the one that had led him to Eliza, was now gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of roots and branches, a labyrinth that stretched endlessly in every direction. "You cannot outrun it," the voice repeated, louder now, as though it was the very heartbeat of the forest. "The fire is coming, and you are its fuel." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The fire, the song, the whispers. Everything was closing in on him. And then, from somewhere deep in the forest, he heard the unmistakable crackling sound again. The fire, it was coming for him. The crackling sound grew louder, unmistakable now. The fire was coming. Marcus could hear it, feel it in the air, the heat of it like a shadow creeping up behind him. He turned to look, but there was nothing, just the dense forest stretching out, thick with shadows and suffocating silence. But the song, the eerie melody that had guided him here, was still there too, ever present, curling around him like smoke. It was louder now, more intense, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat.
Eliza!
Marcus cried out again, his voice raw, desperate. He reached for her, his hand trembling as he stumbled toward her.
Please, help me! You have to help me get out of here!
But Eliza stood motionless, her eyes distant. Her figure fading into the dark, the light surrounding her growing dimmer by the second. The forest was closing in on them, the air thick with the scent of burning wood and the acrid tang of smoke. "You cannot escape," the voice said again, its tone like the hiss of something ancient and malevolent. "You cannot outrun it. The forest has already claimed you, Marcus. You are part of it now." Marcus's chest tightened as the realization sank in. The trees, the song, Eliza. Everything was part of this place, this cursed forest, and he was trapped in it. His breath came in sharp gasps as he turned, looking for any way out, any escape. The flames were still distant, but they were coming closer. He could feel the heat licking at the edges of the forest, creeping toward him, towards Eliza, towards them all. "Run," The voice whispered, soft and dangerous, "Run if you can." Without thinking, Marcus bolted forward, his legs burning with effort, his heart thundering in his chest. He didn't know where he was going, just that he had to move. Had to get away from the fire, from the song, from the forest that was closing in around him. The trees seemed to move with him, shifting, twisting, blocking his path at every turn. He slammed into one, the bark scraping his skin, but he kept going. There had to be a way out. There had to be. And then, through the smoke and the shadows, he saw it. A flicker of light in the distance. Soft, steady, like a lantern swaying in the wind.
Eliza!
Marcus shouted again, his voice hoarse. His breath ragged. He pushed through the underbrush, his body shaking with exhaustion, desperation. He didn't know what he was hoping for anymore. He just needed to get to that light, to something that felt real, something that wasn't this nightmare. But as he drew closer, the light seemed to fade, retreating farther into the forest. He wasn't closer to it. It was moving away. "No," he yelled, his voice cracking. "No, please." The fire was closer now, the heat unbearable, the crackling sound deafening. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of burning wood and ash, the smoke thickening in the air. Marcus could feel the world spinning around him, his legs growing weak, his vision blurring. And then, just as he thought he couldn't go any further, he heard it again. The song. It was no longer distant, no longer fading. It was all around him, vibrating in his bones, in his blood. The melody swelled, rising with the heat of the fire, the two forces converging in a terrible harmony. "It is time." The voice whispered again, this time not from the trees, but from the very air around him, as if it were part of the forest, part of the fire, part of everything. "It is your time, Marcus. You are the fire now." "No," he whispered, falling to his knees, his hands gripping the ground as the flames reached the edge of the clearing. "No, I don't belong here." The fire roared, an overwhelming wave of heat and light that seemed to engulf everything in its path. Marcus could feel it now, the scorching heat licking at his skin, the smoke choking his lungs. The world was a blur of flames and shadows, the song of the forest rising higher, louder, as though the very earth itself was alive with it. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw her. Eliza was standing in the midst of the flames, her figure bathed in the firelight, her face still distant, still unreadable. The fire didn't touch her. She was untouched, standing as if she were part of it, a spectral figure in the heart of the inferno.
Eliza!
Marcus cried out, his voice breaking as he tried to reach her. But the flames between them were too fierce, too overwhelming. He felt the heat searing his skin, but he couldn't stop himself from reaching for her. But Eliza didn't move. She didn't even acknowledge him. She just stood there, watching him as the flames roared, the song of the forest rising louder and louder, filling the air with its haunting melody. And then, as if on cue, the song stopped. Silence, absolute and complete. The flames flickered and dimmed for a moment, as if the world itself had taken a breath. The smoke thinned, the crackling of the fire faded away, and Marcus was left in the eerie quiet, his heart racing in his chest. He looked around, disoriented, but the forest was still there, silent, watching, waiting. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, the weight of it pressing down on him. "Eliza," Marcus called out again, his voice trembling. There was no answer. But as he looked, a faint glow began to rise from the center of the clearing, an unnatural light, soft and warm, but cold at the same time. "Eliza," he repeated, more desperate now. And then, in the center of the light, he saw it. The figure of a woman, her face pale, her eyes empty. She was standing there, her body still, as if frozen in time. "She is gone," the voice whispered from the darkness, the tone heavy with finality. "Eliza is no longer here." Marcus felt a chill creep down his spine, the realization hitting him like a stone to the chest. He had lost her. lost everything. The light in the center of the clearing flickered once, and then it went out. And Marcus was alone. Marcus stood in the blackened clearing, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and grief. The fire had died down, leaving only smoldering embers that cracked and popped in the eerie silence. The forest, once alive with the whisper of leaves and the unsettling hum of the strange melody, was now dead still. He tried to catch his breath, his chest tight as the weight of the situation pressed in on him. Eliza, his only tether to this nightmare, was gone. There was no trace of her now, no glowing figure in the distance, no flicker of light, just darkness and the forest. Eliza, Marcus whispered, his voice raw, though he wasn't sure if he expected an answer anymore. He felt like he was shouting into a void, but there was nothing. The air was heavy with smoke, the scent of burning wood, and ash still clinging to the trees. Every part of him screamed to leave, to run, but he knew, somehow, that there was nowhere to go. The forest was alive, its ancient presence suffocating, its roots burrowing deep into the earth, claiming everything. He glanced around, his mind spinning. The trees seemed different now, as though they were watching him, their twisted branches reaching down like fingers. And then, from somewhere beyond the clearing, he heard it again, the song. Faint, but unmistakable. The haunting melody that had led him here, to this cursed place. It echoed through the trees, seeping into his bones, wrapping around him like a cold embrace. It won't stop, the voice said, no longer a whisper, but a low growl that reverberated in the air around him. It never stops. You belong to the forest now. You are part of it. The song will never let you go. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he clenched his fists. He wasn't sure what terrified him more, the voice, the song, or the realization that he couldn't escape. He turned away from the clearing, his legs moving of their own accord, carrying him through the smoke and the shadows. The trees seemed to part before him, guiding him deeper into the forest. There was no path, no direction, just the pull of the song, growing louder, more insistent. And then, as if the trees themselves had a memory, he found himself at the edge of the same lake he had seen before. The water was still, its surface reflecting the pale light of the moon. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the shore, a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. He staggered toward the water's edge, his reflection staring back at him, pale and drawn. His hair was matted with sweat, his eyes wild, haunted. He looked nothing like the man who had entered the forest all those hours, days ago. The lake was quiet, too quiet. Marcus knelt by the shore, staring into the depths of the water. The reflection staring back at him seemed distorted, almost as if the surface of the lake was warping his image. It was then that he saw it, the faint outline of something beneath the water. Something moving. He gasped, stumbling back, his heart leaping into his throat. The water rippled, and then, with a sudden burst of movement, a figure emerged from the depths, rising from the water like something from a nightmare. It was Eliza. Her body was soaked, her clothes clinging to her skin, her hair slicked back against her face. But it wasn't the Eliza he had known. Her eyes were hollow, dark pools of emptiness, and her skin was pale, almost ghostly. She stood there, her feet submerged in the water, unmoving, as though waiting. "Eliza," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling, his breath catching in his throat. But she didn't respond. Her lips moved. But no sound came from her mouth, just a hollow echo that sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, Eliza sank back into the water, disappearing beneath the surface with barely a ripple. Marcus's heart raced as he scrambled to his feet, staring at the lake, hoping, praying, that she would resurface. But there was only the stillness of the water, the soft ripple of the moonlight reflecting off the surface. The song came again, louder now, swirling around him in a maddening crescendo. "She is gone," the voice hissed. Gone like all the others. You can't save her. You can't save anyone. The words hit him like a physical blow, his body recoiling as if the very air had become poison. He wanted to scream, to fight back against the voice, against this nightmare, but there was nothing he could do. The forest had claimed him. It had claimed them all. But then, amidst the chaos, something inside him snapped. The desperation, the helplessness. It was too much. The anger and grief surged, pushing through the fear. He wasn't just going to lie down and accept this fate. He couldn't. "I won't let you win," Marcus muttered through clenched teeth, his fists shaking at his sides. The trees around him rustled, as if the forest itself was listening, waiting for his next move. But Marcus wasn't done. Not yet. He stood there, the song still ringing in his ears, the fire of determination burning in his chest. The song couldn't control him. Not anymore. He would fight. He had to. Without another word, Marcus turned his back to the lake, to the forest, to the curse that held him in its grasp, and he ran. The trees seemed to blur as he pushed forward, his legs pumping as fast as they could go. The smoke was thick now, choking the air, but he didn't stop. His body was a blur of motion, his mind consumed with one thought: escape. But the forest wasn't going to let him go that easily. Roots twisted beneath his feet, rocks and branches rose up to trip him. Every step was a battle, each moment harder than the last. But still, he pushed forward, driven by the memory of Eliza, by the hope that he could break free from this nightmare. And then, when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, he saw it. The edge of the forest. The open sky. His heart leaped in his chest as he stumbled toward the clearing, the trees parting before him, as if the forest was letting him go. He didn't stop. He kept running, the world a blur of dark trees and light. And then, just as he thought he was free, he heard it one last time, the song. But this time, it wasn't a melody. It was a scream. Marcus's feet pounded against the ground, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and smoke. His chest burned with every breath, his muscles screaming with exhaustion. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when freedom was so close. The scream was different. It wasn't the eerie, haunting melody that had been trailing him, but something far more desperate, far more human. His heart skipped a beat as the sound echoed through the trees, a tortured wail that clawed at the very air.
"Eliza!"
Marcus gasped, his voice ragged. He didn't care if it was foolish. He didn't care if it was impossible. He had to go back. She needed him. For a split second, the clearing before him seemed to vanish. The trees stretched out, impossibly tall, and the path he had been following, the one that had seemed so clear moments before, now seemed to twist and loop around, sending him deeper into the dark heart of the forest. He froze. His instincts screamed at him to run the other way, but his feet were rooted to the spot. The wind began to pick up, howling through the trees as if in response to his hesitation. A low hum filled the air, like the sound of hundreds of voices whispering, overlapping, mixing in a dissonant chorus. "Eliza," Marcus whispered again, his voice trembling. There was no answer. The wind carried a faint, sweet scent, something familiar, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, the scent of flowers, of memories long buried. For a moment, he could almost see her, just beyond the tree line, standing in the moonlight, her silhouette fragile and ethereal. The vision flickered, and he reached out, desperate to close the gap between them. "Don't let her go," a voice whispered. Not from the wind, but from inside his own head. It was low, a rasping sound that seemed to seep through the cracks of his thoughts. The voice was familiar. It was the same voice that had taunted him before, the one that had led him into this cursed place. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog. It was a trap. He had to stay focused. With a surge of resolve, Marcus turned and started back toward the clearing where the trees had parted. His legs were heavy, his mind reeling with the impossible choices he was facing. Should he go back for Eliza? Should he try to escape? The wind picked up again, sending a chill down his spine. The forest seemed to respond to his uncertainty, shifting in ways he couldn't understand. Every step forward was met with the feeling of being pulled in 100 different directions. The path he was on felt wrong. The trees were closing in on him again, their branches twisting like claws, and the shadows beneath them seemed to move, alive with menace. "She's gone. Marcus," the voice said again, this time louder, more insistent. "You cannot save her. She is already part of this place, part of the forest." Marcus clenched his jaw. He refused to listen. He had to fight. The thought of leaving Eliza to whatever fate had befallen her filled him with a sense of dread so deep it made his stomach turn. But then, he heard it. A faint sound, almost like a whisper. "Eliza." It wasn't a shout, but a soft, pleading sound, carried to him on the wind. His heart thudded painfully in his chest as he recognized the voice. It was hers. It had to be. Without thinking, he broke into a run, charging deeper into the forest. The wind whipped past him, carrying the scent of flowers and decay in equal measure. The air felt thick with something more than just smoke now. Something dark, something alive. The trees began to part before him, the dense underbrush thinning as if guiding him forward. The moonlight pierced through the gaps in the canopy, illuminating his path as he plunged into the heart of the forest. And then he saw it. In the center of a small clearing, bathed in pale moonlight, stood Eliza. Her back was to him, her figure faint and translucent like a dream half forgotten. Her hair, soaked and tangled, clung to her face, and her clothes hung loosely from her frame, as though she had been drifting in water for far too long. "Eliza!" Marcus cried out, his voice hoarse with emotion as he rushed toward her. But she didn't turn around. Instead, she stood there, frozen in place, as though unaware of his presence. His chest tightened with panic as he reached out to touch her, but just as his fingers brushed against her shoulder, she jerked away. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, Marcus, don't come any closer." The words hit him like a cold wave. "Eliza." Marcus gasped, confusion and desperation flooding through him. "What's happening? We need to leave. This place, this forest, it's not safe. We can still escape." But Eliza shook her head, her eyes wide with terror as she stared into the distance. "I can't leave," she said softly. "None of us can leave. Not now. Not ever." Marcus's heart froze. "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" "They are coming," she whispered, her voice cracking. "The forest. It's awake." Before Marcus could respond, the air shifted around them. The ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble, the trees groaning with a deep, ancient sound, as if something was moving beneath the earth itself. The wind howled again, stronger now, carrying with it the distinct smell of rot and decay.
"Eliza!"
Marcus shouted, but she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on something behind him, her face pale with fear. A shadow loomed over him. Before he could turn, the ground gave way beneath his feet. The world tipped sideways as he tumbled into the darkness below. The fall seemed endless. Marcus's body twisted in midair, gravity pulling him downward, his limbs flailing, struggling for balance. His mind screamed, but no sound escaped his throat. Everything around him was dark, suffocating, as though the very air was thick with the weight of something ancient and malignant. Finally, his feet hit the ground with a sickening thud. The impact rattled his bones, forcing the air from his lungs. His breath came in shallow gasps as he rolled, his hands scraping against the rough earth. It took a moment for him to regain his bearings. When his vision cleared, he found himself lying in a pit, an unnatural pit, as though it had been carved from the earth by hands far too large and old. The walls were slick with moss and damp, the air heavy with the stench of rot and decay. Marcus pushed himself to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the distant echo of something moving in the darkness, something large, something alive. His skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. "Eliza," he called out, his voice hoarse. There was no answer, not even an echo. He blinked, trying to adjust to the dim, flickering light that seemed to come from nowhere. It was as if the very air shimmered, as though the darkness itself was alive, a sentient force that could feel him. Panic clawed at him. He couldn't stay here. He had to find a way out. But the longer he stood still, the more the whispers came. Soft at first, like distant murmurs, but quickly growing in volume, a cacophony of voices. They were disembodied, fragmented, overlapping, as though hundreds of people were speaking at once, their words tangled and indistinguishable. "Marcus." He froze. The voice was clear this time, sharper than the others. A whisper, just on the edge of hearing, but unmistakable. "Eliza." His breath hitched as he spun around, but there was nothing. Only the shifting shadows and the oppressive silence that followed. He was alone. Or at least, he thought he was. The pit seemed to stretch farther than the eye could see, the walls closing in around him like the throat of some vast, dark beast. There was no sky above, no stars, just an endless expanse of blackness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. But then, something caught his eye. A faint glow flickered in the distance, deep within the pit. It was soft, almost ethereal, like the last remnants of a fading dream. His heart skipped a beat. Maybe, just maybe, it was Eliza. Without thinking, Marcus began to move toward the light, his legs shaky, but driven by an urgency he couldn't explain. The ground beneath him was uneven, and every step he took seemed to echo louder than the last. His breath quickened, and he felt his pulse racing as the glow grew stronger, more distinct. As he neared, the light revealed something strange, ancient carvings, etched into the walls of the pit, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. Symbols, writings. Their meanings were unclear, but the markings were unmistakable. Something about them felt wrong. A sudden gust of wind swept through the pit, sending a shiver down Marcus's spine. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as though the voices were closing in on him. He felt a pressure on his chest, as though the weight of the air itself was pressing against him. "Don't go any farther," a voice whispered in his ear, so close he could feel the breath on his skin. He spun around, his eyes wide with fear. There was nothing there. No one. But the air had shifted. It was as if the pit itself had come alive, its very walls pulsating with a sickening energy. The ground trembled beneath him, and a low growl echoed through the cavernous space, the sound deep and rumbling, like the growl of a beast. Panic surged through Marcus's veins as the shadows around him seemed to stretch, moving in unnatural ways, curling and twisting like serpents. The whispers became deafening, 1,000 voices screaming at him from every direction. The light ahead was no longer comforting. It had become a beacon, a warning, an invitation. "Eliza," he cried out again, his voice trembling, but this time the reply was different. "You're too late," the voice whispered back. It wasn't Eliza. It was something far darker, far older. Marcus staggered backward, his heart racing as the ground beneath him shifted. The walls of the pit seemed to press in tighter, and the air grew colder, thicker. He was being squeezed, suffocated by something unseen. The light ahead flickered violently, and in that moment, he saw it. Something monstrous, something that shouldn't have been there. A shape, dark and formless, a twisted silhouette rising from the depths of the pit. It was alive. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. The shape moved, its form blurring and shifting in the shadows, growing larger, its twisted limbs stretching toward him with terrifying speed. It was a creature, a thing, born from the darkness itself, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Marcus stumbled backward, his mind racing, searching for an escape, but there was none. The pit had no end, no way out. He was trapped. A cold laugh echoed in the depths of the pit. The creature's voice was low, resonant, vibrating through his very bones. You cannot escape. It intoned, its voice a chorus of 1,000 voices. This place, this forest, it is ours. It is your end. And then, from somewhere far away, Marcus heard a sound. A scream.
Eliza.
He turned desperately toward the sound, his heart hammering in his chest. The creature loomed closer, its form becoming clearer, more defined. Its eyes locked onto him with an unnerving intensity. You cannot save her, it whispered. She is ours now. The last thing Marcus saw before the darkness consumed him was the glimmer of that faint light, the faintest hint of Eliza's form, just beyond reach. Marcus awoke to a throbbing pain in his head, a sharp and unrelenting pressure that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. His body was numb, his limbs heavy, as though weighed down by something far beyond the physical. He tried to move, but his muscles refused to obey, leaving him frozen in place. The air around him was thick with the scent of damp earth, musty and rancid, as though the very ground beneath him was rotting. His eyes fluttered open, though his vision was blurred, and he could barely make out the shapes around him. The world felt wrong. He was no longer in the pit, no longer in the depths of that suffocating darkness. No, this place was something else entirely. Slowly, his senses began to sharpen. He could hear the faint rustling of leaves, the distant call of some unseen bird, but these sounds were muted, warped, like they were coming from far away. His vision cleared enough to see he was lying on a patch of grass, but the colors were off, shifting unnaturally between dark shades of green and black, as though the landscape itself was bleeding. A sudden movement caught his eye. It was a figure, hunched and distorted, standing at the edge of the strange, twisted forest. The figure moved toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Eliza. Marcus croaked, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. The figure stopped. A moment of silence hung in the air before it slowly turned to face him. But as it did, Marcus's heart dropped into his stomach. It wasn't Eliza. The figure that approached him was something else. It was human, or at least appeared to be, but its face was hollowed out, eyes sunken deep into the skull, skin stretched tight over bone, as though the life had been drained from it. It was a mockery of a person, a shell of something that had once been alive. Marcus tried to push himself up, but his body wouldn't respond. His mind was trapped, and a cold terror gripped his chest as the figure took another step forward. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said in a voice that was at once hollow and familiar. "None of you should have come." Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the voice. It was Eliza's voice, but it was wrong. It was like an echo of her, distorted, tainted by something darker. What happened to you?" Marcus gasped, his throat dry. The figure moved closer, and as it did, the air around Marcus seemed to grow colder, denser. The forest around them shifted, the trees bending in unnatural angles, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The world felt alive, but in the worst possible way. I tried to warn you," Eliza's distorted voice murmured, "but you didn't listen. You were too desperate, too eager to find answers. Now, we're all trapped here." The figure's eyes locked onto Marcus, and a wave of nausea swept over him. He could feel the weight of the words sinking into him, pulling him deeper into the darkness. "What is this place?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "Where are we?" "You're in the heart of it," Eliza's twisted form replied. "In the very center of the forest, the place where everything begins and ends." The ground trembled beneath him, and Marcus felt the oppressive weight of something ancient and powerful pressing down on him. The trees around them seemed to lean closer, as though listening, watching. "No," Marcus whispered, his mind racing. This isn't real. This can't be real." But the world around him continued to warp and twist, the shadows creeping closer. The forest alive with whispers. The trees groaned and creaked, and the air itself felt thick with malice. The figure that was once Eliza reached out, its bony fingers brushing against his cheek, sending a shock of cold through his skin. "You don't understand," the figure whispered, its voice dripping with a sense of ancient sorrow. "None of us understand. We never did." Marcus's mind raced as the figure stepped back, its form dissolving into the shadows of the forest. The trees closed in, their branches shifting and writhing as though alive, their gnarled trunks bending in on themselves. And then it hit him. The realization that struck him like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just Eliza who was lost in this place. The pit he had fallen into wasn't just a physical hole in the earth. It was something more, something far deeper, more dangerous. It was a place that consumed not just the body, but the soul, bending reality itself, until nothing was left but an empty, twisted mockery of the world he once knew. He had thought he was looking for answers, but all he had found was the truth. "Get out now," a voice suddenly cried from the shadows, pulling Marcus from his thoughts. He turned, heart pounding in his chest, but there was no one there. Only the darkness, the distorted trees, and the sound of something moving in the distance. Something fast, something hungry. Without thinking, Marcus pushed himself to his feet, his body finally obeying his frantic mind. His legs were shaky, and every step felt like it took everything out of him. But he couldn't stop. Not now. He needed to escape. As he ran, the ground beneath him seemed to shift, the path ahead growing more distorted, the trees closing in. His breath came in ragged gasps as his heart raced faster, the weight of the forest pressing down on him, making it harder to move, harder to think. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the forest seemed to open up. Marcus stumbled into a clearing, the oppressive darkness lifting for a brief moment. In the center of the clearing stood an old, dilapidated house. Its windows were cracked, its walls weathered and broken, but it was a structure. It was something he could focus on, something that promised escape. But as he approached the house, a cold dread washed over him. The door creaked open on its own, as though inviting him in. He didn't hesitate, but as he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening bang. The door slammed shut behind Marcus, and the world inside the house went silent. The air was thick, heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. Marcus stood in the dim light, his heart thudding in his chest. The room was empty, save for a few rotting chairs and an old fireplace that hadn't seen fire in years. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and the scent of decay filled the air. And yet, there was something else. A faint humming sound, barely perceptible, but there. It was the sound of something old, something powerful. "You shouldn't have come," the voice whispered, again in Eliza's tone, but distorted by something else. The words seemed to echo through the house, reverberating in his skull. "It's already too late," the voice continued. Marcus turned, scanning the room, but there was no one there, just the oppressive silence, the distant hum that grew louder with each passing second. "Too late for what?" Marcus shouted, the words echoing through the house, his own voice sounding strange and hollow in the silence. "What is this place? What do you want from me?" The humming grew louder, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to make the walls shake. It was no longer just a sound. It was a presence, a force pushing in from all sides. And then it hit him. He was standing in the heart of the forest, in the place where it all began. The house wasn't just a structure, it was a manifestation of the darkness that had consumed Eliza, and so many others. The twisted place that had drawn them all in, that had taken their souls, their lives, their very existence. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, twisting into shapes that defied logic. Faces appeared in the darkness, flickering like ghosts. Some were familiar. Eliza, her twisted form, the friends he had lost. But others were strangers, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent screams. The walls closed in, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. He could barely breathe. The air was thick, choking, and the sound in his ears was growing unbearable. It was as if the house itself was alive, pulsing with an insatiable hunger. Please? Marcus gasped, falling to his knees. The hum was deafening now, a crushing wave of noise that rattled his teeth, his bones. What do you want from me? The floor beneath him cracked open, and the ground fell away, revealing a pit of blackness that seemed to go on forever. The hum turned into a shriek, a terrible, unearthly cry that tore at his mind. Marcus tried to scream, but his voice was lost in the void. The darkness rushed toward him, engulfing him, swallowing him whole. And then there was nothing. When Marcus opened his eyes again, he was back in the forest. The trees were silent, the air still, and the ground beneath him was solid. He was standing in the clearing, his body whole, untouched. The house was gone, but the echoes of the forest lingered. The whispers, the hum, the terrible sense of something watching, waiting. He was free. But in the depths of his soul, Marcus knew the truth. The forest never truly let go. It was always there, in the shadows, in the silence. Always waiting for the next soul to wander too far. And somewhere, deep within the trees, Eliza's distorted voice called out to him one last time. We're never truly gone.